on to item 11, public hearing, subject to the Vallco Shopping District Special Area General Plan Amendments and associated zoning amendments and a second addendum to the Environmental Impact Report for the 2014 General Plan Amendment, Housing Element Update, and associated rezoning project. So do we have a staff report? Wait, what?
So,
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
yeah.
the Vice Mayor has something to say.
yeah. So out of an abundance of caution, I'm recusing myself from this item because my home is located about 939 feet away from the east property line of this 50-acre property. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll wait until you leave the room.
Actually, it's west property line.
Correct. Has anyone seen Councilmember Paul? Okay, well, we have a quorum anyway, so let's move on to the staff report.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members. Today we're here for the Vallco Shopping District General Plan and Zoning Amendments, as well as the associated second addendum to the EIR. I have with me our outside attorney, Eric Phillips, to my right, who's been assisting the city on this topic, as well as housing-related items. These next few slides are general basic site background, which I'm sure everybody is well aware of. But in general, this is a historic site for the mall, currently designated for office, residential, and commercial, and as a priority housing site, which means that it's a site that's utilized to meet the RHNA numbers, which RHNA stands for Regional Housing Need Allocation. The housing element designated 35 units per acre with 389 units and approved by the HCD as such. State law on the housing element required the city to adopt zoning or a specific plan to implement the development of housing. The city created two scenarios. Scenario A, as described and indicated on the slideshow here, and B, to be considered only as an option if a specific plan is not adopted within 3 years. What this will mean is no residential at Vallco and upzone alternative sites to meet the RHNA numbers. The city adopted a specific plan, but since then rescinded that plan. Council considered options to determine how to proceed to meet the RHNA requirement. The June 18th meeting or study session, council directed staff to prepare a general plan amendment to allow 389 units and remove the housing designation. This creates a process in which a GPA for housing is by right, as well as the underlying commercial uses. Brings us to sort of the meat of tonight's meeting, is to consider the general plan amendment process as shown on the slide here. When the general plan was adopted initially, it was deferred most of the development standards to the preparation of the specific plan to provide objective standards in advance of finalizing the plan itself. We have drafted some development standards as part of this first phase, which I'll get into in a little bit. This also requires zoning amendments and addendum to the general plan EIR. The proposed amendments before you would create two new land use categories, which we titled regional shopping to be consistent with the commercial uses that the city currently allows, and noted on the slide. And the second one, regional shopping and retail mixed use as the second category. Mixing the uses is not required, therefore could be all residential or residential mixed with retail. This will allow the 389 units to be developed by right and also immediately as well. The amendment would remove office but maintain the other uses. Kind of hard to see, but I'm going to circle the office, the 2 million that we're removing right there. To do this, of course, a change to allocation table is necessary, which is why I'm showing that table LU1 for you as a reference. This slide shows the other land use element that will also be changed as a result of the proposal tonight, which is the figure LU2, the community form diagram. Detailed modifications are indicated to create development standards for residential developments, which I'll go over in the next slide. What we're proposing, in order to maintain consistency with the housing element, the Vallco Shopping District Special Area must permit at least 389 units by right and at a density of 35 dwelling units per acre. So if you do a little bit of reverse math here, in order to have 389 units, you would need to have 458 units. The housing element, which HCD determined complied with the requirements of the state housing element law, assume that priority housing sites would yield 85% of the maximum unit count. Therefore, consistent with the housing elements methodology and demonstrates that 389 units are realistically achievable. Enough land should be designated to allow 458 units at 35 units per acre. This also shows, the slide shows a split screen of the residential development standards versus non-residential. You see the residential also has height requirement 60 feet if it's purely residential, and 75 feet if the residential is over commercial, like a mixed-use type of development. It'll have setback 1 foot, that's 1 vertical, 1 horizontal from the North Blaney neighborhood, and 1.5 feet from the curb line for every foot of height. And a non-residential allows a height up to 60 feet with a similar setbacks.
Oh, Ben, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Sure.
The number you gave of 389 divided by 0.85, I just want to point out that doesn't include any density bonus.
That's correct.
So it would be a 35% density bonus if they built on-site
Correct.
BMR housing.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification. This diagram shows you the LU19 amendments. This is the final part affected by the proposal tonight, and this is regarding a future development of the Vallco property. Priority approval is also the designation of the 13.1 acres residential uses, which can be a variety of footprints, building footprints. Keep in mind that 1 acre equals 43,560 feet. Thinking of it in terms of square footage, 13.1 acres equals 570,636 square feet. Example of a size, if you can even visualize that, would be, for example, 755 feet by 755 feet, or any other multiplier that results in that total. So we prepared 4 options for you to consider, or you, of course, you can come up with different options if you like. These first 2, option A and B, are grouped together because they are location-wise are similar. They're both on the west side of Wolf and near the Vallco Parkway. So you have Wolf here, of course, Stevens Creek. Okay. These next 2 options, option C, also on the west side of Wolf, but it does not butt up against the existing residential neighborhoods on North Blaney neighborhood, and it goes all the way up to the Stevens Creek Boulevard facade. Option D, it's on the east side, completely on the other side of Wolf, and north of Vallco Parkway, across the street from the formerly known the Rose Bowl, or 19800 project. Again, Wolf, Stevens Creek. Okay. So the zoning amendments are also related to the current proposal. This will allow, again, for immediate development of residential and the permitted commercial uses that are underlying zoning, and these will be required as part of the project proposed for tonight. Environmental analysis. The city has completed the environmental analysis, and our consultant's actually here tonight as well to address any questions or concerns the council and the public may have. Basically, less than the original review the addendum shows reduction in the program that is less and also does not trigger any more impacts. Therefore, no subsequent environmental review is required, and the city can rely on the original certified EIR. Next, I want to go over very quickly on Planning Commission recommendations. On the overhead, you see the actual approved resolution and the language, which recommends City Council to adopt the GPA to establish a height limit of 60 feet for residential and 75 feet if it's residential with a commercial on the ground floor, subject to economic analysis of the feasibility of development, and also subject to additional public engagement. We have a few desk items. Number one is related to GPA 2019-01. There are two corrections there. One is to correct a typo, a couple typos in the footnote under LU 13. And the second one is to remove references in LU 19.1 and .3 for future GPA. The second one is the MCA 2019-01. They have edits. We have edits to Muni Code 19.80.030F5 to clarify that the exception proposed in 19.08.030E only applies to the Vallco site. If the council potentially desires for more housing, then the proposed change will remove any ambiguity when making your motion. You may wish to direct staff to carry out whichever action you wish. And that brings us to our recommendations. The recommendation is to obviously receive the staff presentation, so thank you for your patience. Conduct a public hearing, public meeting, which is what we've done here, and to adopt a few things. I won't read it all, but it's a resolution for the addendum to the EIR. It's a resolution to the GPA to remove remove offense as a permitted use. It's a resolution to establish height limits and development standards, and also introduce and conduct a first reading of a couple of different ordinances related to the mapping and also the Muni Code changes. So with that, I conclude the presentation, and we are here for any questions you may have.
Okay. First, could the city attorney please explain about how the SB 35 plan relates to what we're talking about here tonight?
These changes would not have an impact on the approved SB 35 project.
So the property owner could continue with their SB 35 regardless of what we decide here tonight?
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say that because a lot of emails I received in the past 2 days apparently thought that what we were doing here tonight was like to try to undo SB 35, and we can't do that and we won't do that. So this is solely to talk about these general plan amendments that would really have no effect unless the SB 35 plan did not go forward for some reason. Let's see, what else? So you talked about that we would end up with 600, oh, you said 389, we would get 620 units if they got the density bonus of 35%, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so shall we do public comments now? Do we have any cards?
29.
Okay, we have 29 cards, and you each get up to 3 minutes. We would all appreciate it if you use less than 3 minutes, but you know, you do have 3 minutes. You won't be cut off. So we will proceed with Jennifer Griffin, followed by Muni Mathapatla, followed by Ed Hirschfield. Welcome, Jennifer. You get to go first.
It's early tonight. It's only 9. Okay, this is the good stuff. Okay, I'm going to say right now, I have spent probably the last 9 years of my life dealing with Vallco, and probably there was another developer, and I spent another 9 years before with that group. And I've learned a lot about SB 35, way, way, way more than I ever needed to. And I believe that SB 35, and we'll throw dear Vallco in there, I think its intent is to destroy and break up every city in the state so that there is no need for cities. And I came across some print yesterday where that was actually said. I won't say the state or the city, and it said there is no need for cities now because of this. This is happening in other states. So 35's veiled intent is to wreak havoc in every city in the state, to cause massive disruption in the planning commissions, the city councils, the staff. It is to tax the mentality and tempers of every resident of the state, and it is to cause complete anarchy in the state. That is my veiled interpretation. That is my stupid resident interpretation of 35. And on the side note, then we'll address Vallco. Vallco, Vallco, Vallco. Marcia, okay? It's like, all my relatives go like, what the heck is up at Vallco? Well, let's do Vallco. Okay, the east side again is being under threat from Santa Clara, San Jose, and Vallco. I'm a resident. I live on the east side. I am going to begin to mention the things that I have lost at Vallco as a multi-year resident of Cupertino. I have lost all of my retail shopping, every single bit of it. And there are some things you can't buy online, and Vallco has caused the demise of those. Is it 35? And I object to that horrid wording. Ministerial. I don't even have it here. You can look online. I fussed about it all the time. Like, let's degrade every resident in the state to a kindergartner level. I resent the word ministerial. We are not doing that in my state. So I say, boo to ministerial. And I declare a 45-foot height over the entire shopping center, minimal residential, and please, the 35-foot setback, the Aushes in front of Sears are in the public right-of-way, and they don't belong to Vallco. We need to settle that. Keep the traffic on site.
Please finish up.
Don't overload my schools, and please, let's don't even hear about Vallco. I want to talk about 17. I was stuck 2 hours on Sunday night.
Okay, Jennifer,
just
please.
Just look it up.
Please.
Yeah. Let's start. Let's just get rid of
Jennifer, you're out of time.
Of 35
please.
in Vallco. Thank you.
Mooney, can we not applaud, please? Mooney Manapatla, followed by Edward Hirschfield, followed by Kevin McClelland.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Muni Madhipatla. I am a resident of Cupertino, so I'm here representing myself, just myself. I just want to clarify something. The property owner has sent out misleading communications to the community members, urging them to write to the City Council and demand that there be no downzoning of Vallco, right? But the reality is that there is no downzoning being considered here tonight, right? Even if these GPAs pass, the property owner can continue with the current SB 35 project, right? You already talked about it. The property owner never received rezoning, so there is no rezoning to be taken away, right? Any rezoning that would have taken place would have occurred based on successful specific plan. There was no successful specific plan, right? So what the City Council is considering here tonight is planning, not rezoning, right? Let's be clear. You are talking about planning, not rezoning. This is what we elected you guys to do. With the planning commissioner more recused from decisions on Vallco, the planning commission is deadlocked with 2 pro-resident members and 2 developer-controlled members. So their actions don't pass with a 2-2 vote. Until the city council acts to fix the situation on the planning commission, the city council must be the one making decisions on these matters. So basically, you are discussing about planning, not on planning amendments, general plan amendments, not rezoning. So thank you.
So I would point out that actually today we are considering, I don't know if you want to call it upzoning, but it would be rezoning that 13.1 acres for the 389 units.
Okay, so that's, you are rezoning only part of the Vallco, not the entire one. And in your mind, you are upzoning it from what it is today.
Well, I don't know if I want to say, one way, which is which, upzoning or downzoning, but it's not, it would be zoning for that residential if we pass that.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is Ed Hirschfield, followed by Kevin McClellan, followed by Lisa Warren. Welcome, Ed.
I live on the east side of Cupertino, have for, as I said, 57 years. And I want to point out that I favor the development at Vallco. The current plan was not my first choice. My first choice was the Hills, which, as I said, was voted for by a majority of the residents of Cupertino. Did not go forward because 2/3 was required at the time to pass a rule. But I think the whole meeting tonight is moot. I mean, the probability of SB 35 not going forward is probably far less than 1%. I don't understand why we're wasting the money with studies, why we're wasting all our time with this meeting to act on a probability that is approaching 0. What is this all about? Why are we doing this? Is this PR? So many misrepresentations have been made on this. So much energy has been wasted. The state's passed a law. The law has established the right for SB 35 to go forward in recognition of the fact that people who work somewhere have to live somewhere. And we need to have room for lots of people to live in Cupertino to service all the businesses we have here. I mean, we have to recognize the fact that this is a growing city and we have to grow with it. We cannot remain a suburban city. And we ought to recognize it and do everything we can do to facilitate it. City council members, today is the first day of the rest of your life. Do everything you can to enable the project at Vallco to be as successful as it can be, to proceed at the highest pace possible, consistent with avoiding chaos in the city. Please do that. Please stop trying to resist, inhibit, slow down. It isn't doing anybody any good. Today or yesterday, the city was sent a letter threatening to sue the city for hundreds of millions of dollars should this downzoning pass. I don't want that liability for me or any of my friends or for you, the city council members. If a $500 million finding should be made against the members of the city, each of us would probably be liable for several tens of thousands of dollars in liability to pay the finding of that lawsuit. We're going to recognize that what we're doing going forward and trying to slow this down is just wasting our money and putting us all at risk. Please don't do that.
Okay. I would like to point out that Measure D did not require a 2/3 majority, and it failed with less than 50%. And also, there's no downzoning being considered. Thank you. Kevin McClellan, followed by Lisa Warren, followed by Charmaine Yu. Welcome, Kevin.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Kevin McClellan, and I am here representing myself. I'm here to urge you to vote against the ordinances and resolutions as stated in Agenda Item 11. This is not the best and highest use for this project in this land. Several years ago, we had a housing shortage. Now we have a housing crisis. And if this continues, or we continue along this path, it's going to turn into a disaster. Currently, we have teachers that can't afford to live in the communities in which they teach, and teachers want to live in the communities in which they teach. How long until that's beyond a crisis? We have seniors that can't downsize in the community. We have kids from our schools that can't come back once they've graduated from college, cannot come back into the community to have us benefit from the education, the great education they got here. Even the majority of the residents that currently own a home could not sell that home and buy another home in town. And so we're already facing what's beyond a crisis here in town. And before it becomes a disaster, I would urge you to vote against these items. Thank you.
Okay, next is Lisa Warren, followed by Charmaine Yu, followed by Richard Mellinger. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. So back to the booklet. What it is, and I did send you all email yesterday, and actually you'd been CC'd on one sent a month or more ago to Planning Commission with some of the same information. I did notice today that I didn't attach one report of the survey, but it's in the book now, and it's just the on forum versus off forum, and they're almost identical anyway, so it just basically doubles the information as being the same. So back in 2015, after the famous December 2nd, 3rd, 4th meeting where office allocation of 2 million square feet was given to that Vallco site, there was an uproar in the community for good reason, and there was an attempt by the city to gather some information, and that's when a workshop in February of 2015 and this survey in March of 2015 came about. And as a result, the May 19th, 2015 staff report on the subject of the general plan amendment to consider changes to citywide development allocations for office, commercial, and hotel uses, and as well as building planes and height limits, and actually community benefits was part of the mix as well. Staff's report, based on community input from both the workshop and the surveys, which is what council was looking for, was to make no further amendments to the general plan that was adopted that fateful night on December 4th, 2014. These are some quotes from the 11-page staff report from that item number, which was 7B. There was a 7A and 7B. The workshop was conducted, and people discussed what they considered to be appropriate building forms and heights, including building planes, within different special areas, nodes, and gateways in the city. The groups also provided their input on whether or not the city should establish community benefits programs. We never did get our workshop on community benefits because staff recommended community benefits be stricken from the general plan, and, well, that's a strong word, taken out and reworded differently because there wasn't well, I won't talk about community benefits, I don't have enough time. But it is something to consider in the future. An additional online survey, which is before you in that booklet. There's a summary in the staff report. Over 80% of respondents stated that they were Cupertino residents. Over 55% of the residents stated they do not want to see any increase in building heights for six of the 7 identified areas.
Okay, finish up, please.
Over 50% of the residents said they do not want to change the existing 1.5 to 1 building plane requirements along the south side of
Okay,
Homestead.
thank you, Lisa.
You have it there. You know what to do. Thank you.
Charmaine Yu, followed by Richard Mellinger, followed by Peggy Griffin. Welcome, Charmaine.
Good evening. My name is Charmaine Yu. I'm a real estate and land use litigator from Cobblins Patch, Duffy and Bass, and I'm here on behalf of VPO, which is the owner of the site that's at issue here, the Vallco Fashion Mall site. Before I start on my comments about the resolutions at issue, I do want to make one clarifying point about some of the opening remarks about SB 35, and there was some reference to the project not being able to proceed for some reason. And I think it's fair to be clear that the city is working in active collaboration with Friends of Better Cupertino in the litigation in order to be able to block that project. And I don't think it's fair to be elusive about that when so many people are focused on that. So with that, let me move on to the issues at hand here. We've submitted a letter detailing our objections and the defects with the resolutions at issue. And attached to that was a report by the Concord Group making clear that these amendments that are proposed and the zoning rules that are being proposed will in fact render the entire Vallco site infeasible for development. So I realize that it's a detailed letter and a detailed report, but I encourage you and frankly any members of the public to review that. If in fact these resolutions are adopted, the Vallco site will remain undeveloped and vacant for the foreseeable future. I'm not going to use my time here to go through all the details in the letter and the report. I do want to focus on good governance process and also the litigation risk that the city is exposing itself to by virtue of these resolutions. So good governance process requires solicitation of input from stakeholders, finding the right legislative fix, and then understanding the consequences of what you are doing. It is frankly shocking that the city is proposing to push through these amendments over the course of two summer months, when in fact the prior planning process for the Vallco site took years and involved participation of thousands of Cupertino residents. These are being pushed through without solicitation of input from the actual property owner or from, all of the city residents who participated in the last planning process. There is also no comprehension either by the Planning Commission or by this body or by the public of the consequences of what is being proposed to you this evening. So let me raise one example, which is the 13.1 acres. There is a proposal to, in fact, concentrate all of the housing on the site to a 13.1 acre portion. There's been no study of that. The Planning Commission had no proposals and no recommendation. What you have before you tonight is 4 proposals, or another one that you could draw yourselves, and in fact 2 paragraphs from city staff saying that 2 proposals would be preferable to the other.
Please finish up.
Okay, let me move on to litigation risk.
Well, you're out of time. Thank you. I wonder if the city attorney.
I did have a question for
Okay.
the speaker, though. So under some contention has been the economic analysis, and in your letter, you're basically saying there's a taking. There's also, this would render the site economically unfeasible. So the Concord Group has done one study. The city has done another study. We had more studies done last year by EPS. My question to you is, are you comfortable with the studies that you seem to previously support that were done by the city's independent consultant during the specific process, that is the EPS studies, for those prior projects?
So I'll have to confess that I was not involved with the Vallco project at the point in time when the EPS studies were promoted. So I'll just take your word for it. I would say.
Well, let me ask this.
Yeah, sure.
Is your client comfortable with the work that was done by EPS when we went through the specific plan?
I'm just going to have to defer to whatever comments they made. But if I can just make one comment as to the EPS study as it stands today, which is that there have been significant changes in the market, in construction costs, et cetera, that couldn't have been accounted for in the EPS plan. And in fact, you have a much more recent report that was submitted to the Planning Commission, commissioned by the city, that was prepared by Strategic Economics, that I think can also provide some guidance to the city as to how economic feasibility for the site should be assessed, in addition to the Concord Group report.
Okay.
I do.
It's a complex subject, but I mean,
Sure.
during deliberation, I'm certainly interested in exploring the question a little
Yeah.
more. Thank you.
So I have one question too. I think you said if these were adopted, then this parcel could not be developed because it would not be economically feasible.
Correct.
But even if these are adopted, the SB 35 plan would still stand. So what are you actually saying here?
You're absolutely right, which is if the SB 35 project proceeds, then these amendments are basically sort of for naught.
Correct.
But as we all know, the SB 35 project is currently in litigation. The petitioner is Friends of Better Cupertino, with the city standing on the petitioner side. And so we're awaiting the outcome of that litigation. We certainly think that the SB 35 project is going to sail through the courts, and that these amendments will, in fact, have no effect.
Okay.
So that's.
Can the city attorney, do you want to comment on that statement?
I would appreciate a chance to comment on that. It's
Thank you.
absolutely false to say that the city is working in active collaboration with Friends of Better Cupertino in the litigation. We have been very clear in our briefing that we are neither supporting or opposing their writ petition. I have not had any communications with Friends of Better Cupertino's attorneys beyond the procedural issues that I have also spoken to you and Vallco's attorneys about. And so I just want to make very clear that we are not collaborating with them on that litigation. We're staying neutral.
Okay. Next we have Rich. Oh, sure. Sorry. Go ahead.
So with regard to the economic feasibility, has your client applied that analysis, be it the initial EPS study or the study that you've come up with more recently, to the SB 35 project? And if so, what is the conclusion relative to the economic feasibility of what's being proposed here?
You know, I don't believe that exercise has been undertaken because of the very compressed time period in which these amendments have been proposed. You know, the very short time period here. I do understand that there was, in fact, an economic feasibility report that was prepared and submitted when that SB 35 application was made, but I don't think that there's any additional economic feasibility reporting on the SB 35 project to submit.
Well, is the economic feasibility study either the one that your client recently generated or the one that was originally generated by the neutral economic firm applicable to SB 35? And if not, why?
So I can't, I understand your question, and I'm afraid that I'm just not equipped to answer it because I haven't done that analysis, and it's obviously one that requires a lot of sophisticated analysis, and so I don't want to transpose the analysis that was prepared for the amendments onto a completely different project that has obviously a very, very different scheme. I certainly think that some of the inputs that are relevant, that is construction cost, et cetera, would be transferable regardless of the project. But I really can't speak to where that feasibility analysis would come out.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
And you know what, one last item before I walk away from the podium and forget, which is there were some additional items that should have been appended to our letter, but we inadvertently forgot to put them on, and they are letters from developers that are essentially more backup for the Concord Group report that was submitted. So I'm not sure who I should hand these up to. Oh.
Okay, moving on. Richard Mellinger, followed by Peggy Griffin, followed by Connie Cunningham. Welcome, Richard.
Council members, Richard Mellinger speaking for myself again. I have never heard of, let alone seen, a general plan amendment on this scale move so quickly with so little public engagement or public input. Now, the fact is there was a plan there were actually several plans last year that were available to you that had quite a great deal of public input available. that engage with a variety of stakeholders in the community, including residents, including the developer, including, pretty much anyone who wanted to come. It was an excellent process. And now you are in the space of less than 2 months attempting to completely rewrite the zoning for one of the largest development sites in the city. It doesn't make any sense to me. And as far as I can tell, honestly, it's pretty outrageous. It's a violation of good governance. It's a violation of due process. It's a violation of the public trust. It's a violation of your campaign pledges to govern transparently and to seek public input before making major decisions that affect the future of the city. This is it's really beyond the pale, and saying something's beyond the pale in Cupertino is saying something. So let's be clear, if you remove the office space and you don't replace it with anything else, you're setting yourself up to have a multi-acre derelict site in the heart of your city. I can't imagine any of you would actually want that. Maybe you do. That's a choice. That's a choice you can make. But if you don't add something to replace that office space of comparable value, that is what you're going to end up with. Now, I absolutely, 100% agree with the concerns around the jobs-housing ratio, jobs-housing fit, the continued growth of office space in this valley without adding enough housing to go with it. I absolutely agree with those concerns. But stopping office construction is not sufficient to end the jobs housing fit. You also need to build housing. You need to build lots of housing. So, I urge you to reject the proposed amendments here tonight. As Mr. Hirschfeld pointed out, they're probably moot anyway. And if you're serious about re-envisioning Vallco, there needs to be a community process, and if you don't want office there, you need to replace it with something of comparable value. That means market rate housing. That means a lot of market rate housing. That would subsidize much of the BMR that is already considered under the SB 35 proposal, and would actually make this city, help this city to drive down its jobs housing imbalance. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Peggy Griffin, followed by Connie Cunningham, followed by James Moore. Welcome, Peggy.
Mayor Scharf, council members, staff, I am for these amendments and the related changes required, specifying the setbacks, putting back building heights, and also isolating residential density of 35 units on 13.1 acres to prevent abuse. I'm for that. I prefer the location of the housing to be on the west side, and the reason, I don't know if this comes, does this show up?
Barely, but, oh yeah, that's good.
Okay. I've been looking at the alternatives. If you go to this one, this spot right here by the freeway, I don't know what you would use it for. And, well, there's another one. Let's see if I can do this. This one here, I don't know what you would use, the area by the freeway. So I guess what I'm asking is that you discuss which of the areas and whether or not the proposed setbacks and heights would allow the number of units that you want. Has the staff looked at this? I know the math works, but do the heights and setbacks work for these? Anyway, thank you for your work.
Okay, and I think if the area by the freeway is what I understand, that's not part of the applicant's land, so.
Okay.
There would be, yeah.
And the other thing is define retail, please.
Okay, thank you. Connie Cunningham, followed by James Moore, followed by Jean Bedord. Welcome, Connie.
Good evening, Mayor and council members, attorney. My name is Connie Cunningham. I do serve on the Housing Commission, but tonight I speak for myself. First off, I would say that I concur with the resolution that was put forward by the Planning Commission. It is written up in the report. I can't speak it verbatim, but I do know that they were urging you not to vote on the amendments and so forth that you have before you, but instead to go forward with more community outreach and that kind of thing. They were particularly concerned about trying to decide on the 13.1 acres and where you would put that without further insight from people who have expertise in that area. That being said, I wanted to also say that I urge this council to approve a Vallco specific plan that encourages negotiation with the developer. Such a plan would keep all ideas on the table. Open space, which hasn't been mentioned, but open space, housing, affordable housing, commercial and retail, hotel, and yes, some office space. Height limits that allow for keeping open space and affordable homes in this area. On page 10 of the staff report, I believe there is a significant error in the number of BMR units, which leads to a very wrong conclusion that we need just a small number of houses at Vallco. Note that the 563 RHNA goal for BMR units, the numbers of 19 units and 57 units for the Hamptons and Marina are all for BMR portion of the named projects. However, the 389 units for Vallco and the 200 units for the Oaks are for the total project residential units. The lower income units will be a subset of those, 58 for Vallco and 40 for the Oaks. The conclusion drawn from the numbers as written, I believe, is incorrect. The total lower income units are 19 plus 57 plus 58 plus 40, which equals 174. Not nearly enough to meet the goal of 563. So that, just as a fact, I wanted to present. I also wanted to say that I suggest that rather than thinking in terms of a state-generated RHNA, which is how we all think about it, that we think about it the way our housing element writes it and is quite eloquent. The introduction says, the long-term vitality of Cupertino and the local economy depend upon the availability of all types of housing to meet the community's diverse housing needs. As Cupertino looks towards the future, increasing the range and diversity of housing options will be integral to the city's success. Consistent with the goal of being a balanced community, this housing element continues the city's commitment to ensuring new opportunities for residential development. We have not built, except for the veranda, new affordable housing for over a decade.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's not true, but anyway. James Moore, followed by Jean Bedord, followed by Ignatius Ding. Welcome, James.
I'm Jim Moore. Again, been in Cupertino for over 40 years, raised 2 children. They went to school here. I want to go through just a quick view of some numbers that someone in Palo Alto did, and then I've done them for Cupertino. So I want to get some agreement here. The office, if you build office, it attracts new jobs. That's what's taking place. It used to be factories that attracted the new workers, but now it's office. And the numbers I'm going to use are from the Census Bureau, and they have quite a lot of numbers. And this is for the 7-year period, 2010 to 2017. And we're going to look at 2 specific areas, and then we'll look at Cupertino. And one of the areas is the West Bay. That's where we are. Includes San Francisco County, and you can see there Cupertino, Palo Alto, a few other nearby cities, and then the rest of the Bay Area, which is everything else, Oakland, San Jose, and cities to the south of us. And if you look at the numbers for the past 7 years, 2010 to 2017, for the West Bay, our side of the Bay, you get 2.1 new jobs and you get one employed resident. Okay, that doesn't mean that that one employed resident is going to work with those 2.1 jobs. It's not that kind of an association. It just means that from a number standpoint, that during that period, you ended up getting one more of the residents in the West Bay employed. For the rest of the Bay Area, Oakland, San Jose, it's 0.4 new jobs. But during that period, you ended up getting one new employed resident because of the jobs that are being created, not just the new jobs in that particular side of the bay. How about Cupertino? That same period, 5.2 new jobs resulted in one employed resident here in Cupertino. And if you look at the difference between what we're doing in Cupertino and what's happening in the West Bay, which includes us, and the East Bay, we're 2.5 times as far as creating jobs than the West Bay, other cities, and 12 times from the East Bay. And there's some things that you can look at by what we're doing. We're creating jobs, and of course, that comes from office and a lot of side effects, very severe side effects. And I think for the most part, anybody that lives here knows what those are. And this is just kind of a list. Again, the traffic, the gridlock, all of that, sky-high rents, shocking house prices.
Please finish up.
Yep. And so we're kind of the job bank for the Bay Area.
All right, thank you. Jean Bedord, followed by Ignatius Ding, followed by Jeff Paulson. Welcome, Jean.
Good evening, Mayor Scharf and council members. My name is Jean Bedord, and I live here in Cupertino. I am here to urge you to vote no on the general plan amendments for Vallco that you are considering tonight. First, I am appalled by the lack of noticing for these agenda items. Downzoning Vallco significantly affects the entire city of Cupertino. Over 20,000 voters and over 60,000 residents. Yet no, repeat no, community meetings have been held on the impact on the entire community. These resolutions are being considered with a paltry 776 email addresses and only 96 public hearing notices mailed to property owners within 300 feet of the site. What about renters? About 40% of Cupertino residents are renters, so they aren't important? What about seniors who don't have computers? They don't count either. Yes, there was a formal legal notice in the Cupertino Courier, but there's a lot of unread newspapers on driveways. In contrast, last year's community-driven process involved postcards to the entire city, at least 10 public meetings and interviews. Councilman Willie, you have advocated for more extensive notifications. So why is this even being considered without adequate notification? Secondly, the economic analysis provided to the city by Hazeroth Economics Group make no sense. I'm not an expert at analyzing commercial viability, but why is this report based on 13 acres when the site is 50 acres? Shouldn't the site be developed as a whole? What about the other 37 acres? The marginal feasibility is based on the assumption that those 13 acres are solely for sale condominiums with no multifamily rentals that are desperately needed. In addition, the analysis caps the BMR at 15%, but the council has expressed a desire for 20 to 25% BMR, which would clearly make the project economically unfeasible. Please vote no tonight on these resolutions to downsize Vallco. They make no legal or economic sense.
Thank you. Ignatius Ding, followed by Jeff Paulson, followed by Ethan Littman. Welcome, Ignatius.
Mr. Mayor and member of the council, good evening again. We all know Cupertino, like the rest of the Bay Area and California in general, have two major problems: traffic gridlocks and overloads and housing shortage crisis. No question, Cupertino must do its part to help alleviate the crisis that literally destroy the quality of our lives bit by bit, make everyone miserable. All of us support the city to pursue solutions to address both. Cupertino residents are absolutely for housing. We're definitely not a group of anti-housing activists, as some French nut jobs and local media try to portray us as such. It is also a fact the city of Cupertino has granted 40% more housing allocation to various developers above the RENA, set by ABAC as the state law mandates. We have to work with the state legislature to make sure developers moving forward on those things. And worst come to worst, we should exercise eminent domain if the state law allows. In the last 7 to 10 years, the growth and number of jobs is more than 5 times faster than the increase of housing development, even though the recent consolidation of a large number of Apple offices into Apple Park in Cupertino, since the company mostly moved employees around without substantial increase in headcounts. With that in mind, Cupertino must stop building any more offices or mixed-use complex with a large office space as proposed by certain developers. Otherwise, we are adding fuel to the fire. That would accelerate the increase of morning traffic of the office worker into our city, and all the throwaways, such as Stevens Creek, Homestay, Bollinger, Dianza Boulevard, Sterling, and etc., are severely backed up on both ends of our city limit. It's now uncommon to take up 40 minutes to go through merely 3 or 4 blocks during rush hours. When we welcome the construction of a much needed housing, we must also be careful in planning and distribute the housing units allocation. Cupertino must make sure the additional housing not create unmitigatable traffic loads as a result. In other words, we should not allow high-density construction at choke points near I-280 and 85 entrance. So therefore, I support the resolution to remove the provisional office allocation from Vallco site. We'll welcome the property owner to work with the residents and develop a plan to address both traffic and housing crisis. But please, no more smear and attack. That must stop.
Okay, thank you, Ignatius. Jeff Paulson, followed by Ethan Littman, followed by John McGeegan, I believe. Welcome, Jeff.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. My name is Jeff Paulson. I live in Cupertino. You might be pleased to hear that I have a 2-word comment. The 2 words are fear and love. But I must briefly elaborate. When I was 15, one of my friends turned to me and said, Jeff, you know, I've been thinking, and I think that all human motivations stem from either fear or love. And I must confess that when I was a young man growing up on a Silver Spoon 400-acre estate on the hills of Palo Alto, I felt pretty privileged, and I felt, frankly, not very compassionate. In fact, one of my colleagues at the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District spoke disparaging of the 408ers. Well, I have been a 408er for 33 years, and through the illnesses of my children, through the death of one of them, through the decades my wife and I have spent laboring in the east side of San Jose with the poor, I have developed compassion, and I have a compassion on the poor, on the struggling young people who are looking for a place to live, who sit in traffic for hours every day. And so I think we need to be compassionate in terms of our housing, not be fearful of new people coming into the city, not be fearful of outsiders coming to our meetings, not be fearful of creative solutions that may be different from what we had in the past. But also, I love Cupertino. I love it what it was, I love what it is, but I also love what it will become. And we have a lot of very smart, creative people, especially on the dais here. And we need to work together, not separately, not through fear, but through love of each other, through love of our city, through love of our less fortunate people, and through the love of our own creativity to create a vibrant and creative, exciting city for the 21st century. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Well stated. Next, we have Ethan Littman, followed by, I'm sorry, I can't read your name, John McGeegan, followed by Al Defrancisco. Welcome, Ethan.
So I actually hesitated to come to this meeting and address the council because I had seen so much tribalism erupt in the city over the years. I grew up here. I started, my parents moved to Cupertino when I was 3. So I've seen a lot of change. Like, everybody here is freaked out about change. Whether it's the city getting bigger, sure. Like, we're not getting the apricot orchards back, right? We all know that. I've spent the last 15 years of my life focused instead of on tech, which my father did, to clean tech. And there's some analogies here that I wanted to highlight. The housing issue, it doesn't stop at a border. So when somebody says somebody's from Sunnyvale or somebody's from Cupertino, that's garbage. It's obnoxious garbage. I've spent my time working on clean tech. CO2, particulate matter, these things don't stop at the border between Sunnyvale and Cupertino or between California and Oregon. So yes to this love thing, and this tribalism is not going to get us to a solution. It doesn't get us to a solution at the federal level, and I'm seeing the same thing here at the local level. And I think we can all do better. So as somebody who grew up here, somebody who's maybe a little bit younger than the average speaker in front of you, I'll say my personal experience is one that it's not a place that I can make home. It's a place where I came after my father passed away and lived with my mother, and that's a 5-bedroom home. And she doesn't have a place to go in Cooper. She can't stay either. She can't get, so clearly a diverse housing stock is important, clearly. And there's these problems are hard, and I hope everybody can just work together and really put the best effort forward. And yeah, thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you. John McGeegan, followed by Al DeFrancesco, followed by Albert Liu. Welcome, John.
Hi, I'm John McGuigan, 42 years resident of Cupertino with my wife. We support downsizing the Vallco thing by eliminating the office space. These two numbers, I'm trying to make my point with this. The SB 35 law eliminated any EIR requirement. But if you look at the various square footage components of the SB 35 and the Vallco specific plan, they're about at the same scale. And on the Vallco specific plan on page 48 of the EIR, it pointed out how bad the traffic would be with that scale of a project. And I think a good part of that is the office component. Basically, our friends and family and the poor people of Saratoga, San Jose, those south of us are going to have to deal with the freeway that is totally stopped. So what are these two numbers? The first number is the distance from the Earth to the moon and back. The second number is the number of vehicle miles traveled in the EIR that projects of this scale are going to add. They're just going to totally stop the freeways. So that's why I'm against the office component. I'm all for the housing and whatever we can do to build housing of all kinds of different mixes, but it's the office problem that we've all talked about. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Al Defrancisco, followed by Albert Liu, followed by Rick Kitson. Welcome, Al.
I'm Al Defrancisco. I've been a resident of Cupertino now for 45 years, I think. So, and I live right next to the Vallco shopping center when it was actually working. So I don't have a problem with a lot of activity. But what I will say is that, yes, we want retail, but I don't think we're going to want as much retail as everybody thinks, because when we did have it, there was only so much shopping, and the locals, people are going someplace else to shop. Yes, we want housing, and I think we could probably do with twice what is being proposed. And no, I don't think we want office, because office does exactly what everybody knows. It just creates more jobs. So why are we building office if we're trying to create a jobs housing imbalance? I think the only possibility is to leave a little room somewhere for maybe a couple of small office towers that may be near to the freeway or whatever that could be used to help offset some of the costs. And I think in general, my height limit is 65 feet. That's sort of the Rose Bowl and the one-to-one setbacks. I think the issue here is really Cupertino is for the benefit of Cupertino and for the residents. And I don't know that Cupertino is going to solve all of the South Bay housing crisis on its own. We're a pretty small city. But the residents really need to decide and make that influence. I think SB 35 has never talked about the housing imbalance. It only talks about lower income housing. And so as long as you have a bus stop, you can build as much office space as you want. And the Mercury News, in every piece of it's ever covered, never mentions the fact that we're going to put 10,000 jobs on this site. It only mentions the fact that we're trying to hold back on the housing. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Al. Next, we have Albert Liu, followed by Rick Kitson, followed by Sujatha Venkatraman, I believe. Albert, welcome, Albert.
Hi. Good evening. This has been a long night, so I'll make it at least entertaining, maybe. I'm Albert Liu. I'm a 35 years resident of Cupertino. And there was a gentleman. I'm going to vote for him because he speaks everything that I'm going to speak. I'm against what you are going to do tonight. Sorry. If you already unilaterally decided to put this on your agenda, and then I'm sure that you're going to be strong-armed to push it through. If you do that, you are pushing Cupertino, the whole city, into a lawsuit. Lawsuits are expensive. And you know what? Money wins lawsuits. We have enough money to go against the state of California. This is a frivolous nonsense, a waste of money. Okay? So please stop it. There's no need to go any further. Now, SB 35. Gee, according to Jennifer, you would think that it's written by evil Republicans and signed into law by a Republican governor? Well, I don't think so, huh? You know, SB 35 is promoting low-cost housing, and we are against it. Are we being snobbish? Are we being more snobbish than Palo Alto and Los Altos? Because they are going ahead with SB 35, and you guys are fighting it. Wow, what a news! Cupertino becoming more snobbish. Well, you know, another person mentioned about this nice hotel that's going to put Cupertino on the map. Well, I tell you what, moving forward with the Sand Hill project for Vallco is going to put Cupertino really on the map. That's positive. If it doesn't, if you killed it, then it will also put Cupertino negatively on the map. That is really good. Better for Cupertino with a pile of debris. Is that what you want? Okay, so please, there is no shame in going and work with Sand Hill to have a compromise. No lawsuit. Just get it done. Thank you very much.
Okay. Rick Kitson, followed by Sujatha Venkatraman, followed by Vinod Balakrishnan. Welcome, Rick.
Mr. Mayor, council members, good evening. My name is Rick Kitson. I'm Director of Communications for the Cupertino Chamber of Commerce. Founded in 1954, the Cupertino Chamber of Commerce is a nonprofit business organization with members that employ more than 45,000 people. The Chamber works to assist and strengthen local businesses and to advocate for a vibrant, sustainable, and healthy community and economy. On behalf of the Cupertino Chamber of Commerce and its members, I'm here to acknowledge the difficult and important decisions the Council has this evening. There are many reasons for the Council to consider a resolution amending the general plan to remove office as a permitted use from the Vallco shopping district. Economic viability is not one of those reasons. The city's own economic development strategic plan advocates for mixed use. As both the Chamber of Commerce and the City of Cupertino enter into their 7th decade, we encourage the Council to take a serious look at the long-term economic viability of this decision. Our community, our economy, our families, our transportation, our shopping have all changed since we started business and since this city was incorporated, and it continues to change. Please consider very seriously before you take these actions. Thank you for your most serious consideration, and thank you for helping Cupertino to be a vibrant, sustainable, and healthy community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Sujatha Venkatraman. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Vinod Balakrishnan, and then I have one with no name, so I will put that aside. And then Marie Lou. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council Member. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Sujatha Venkatraman, and I'm the Associate Executive Director of West Valley Community Services. I'm representing West Valley Community Services today. I was so happy to see all of you, most of you, at the veranda opening. We were celebrating a collaborative project that was built. It took time, but it brought in solution. It brought in solution for seniors, low-income seniors who needed housing. 19 units after a decade. It's a very hopeful project. A lot of our clients who access services, low-income seniors, became hopeful. They're on the wait list. But today, we are back again with a project that will bring affordable housing, but with no solution. With issues that is going to stall this project. Issues that is taking affordable housing out of the priority. I thought that the council was working towards affordable housing, and it supported that. Today I got a call from a principal from a Cupertino school district. She had a mom call, she has 3 kids, different grades, and mom said that they just started school, but they got a notice to rent increase. Mom said she cannot pay. They have to move. The school's working with them. They called me, said, what are your solutions? I said, West Valley can offer temporary solution. We can help them with rent, but long term, they need affordable housing. Now this family is going to go into that statistics in 2 years in your point in time, which is already saying that there is a 25% increase in homelessness. So let's stop that. Let's find solution. Let's put affordable housing back into priority. when you vote. Let's vote with compassion. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Vinod Balakrishnan, followed by Marie Liu, followed by Celia House. Welcome, Vinod.
My name is Vinod Balakrishnan, a Cupertino resident. When Sandhill Properties bought Vallco, it was zoned for office. It was not zoned for housing and office. The only obligation for city was to rezone sufficient acreage for housing, for our housing needs. The 389 unit could be increased based on 35% density bonus plus an allowance on the 85% rule for maximum of 620 units. I request you to please vote yes on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Marie Liu, followed by Celia House, followed by Chin Pen. Welcome, Marie.
Hi, Mayor Sharf and members of the City Council. My name is Marie Liu. I'm a Cupertino resident, and tonight I'm speaking on behalf of Cupertino for All. We are disappointed that this agenda item was only given the legal minimum of advance notice and open meetings. Past amendments to the general plan underwent lengthy periods of active public outreach, including workshops and citywide mailing notices. This lack of notice runs contrary to the ideals of transparency and public engagement that many of you ran on. We ask you to recognize that while many of you ran in support of the Vallco referendum, a vote for any one of you was not a vote for any specific change to the Vallco plan, and certainly not for these particular amendments. We're also curious why these amendments don't take the opportunity to increase Vallco's housing allocation. Mayor Sharf, you have described this council as having a pro-affordable housing majority. I would think that majority should find it appropriate to use the reclaimed office allocation totaling 2 million square feet to significantly increase the amount of housing at Vallco. We also remain concerned that these changes will open up our city to lawsuits from the state of California, from advocacy groups like Carla, and from Sandhill itself. I care about the jobs housing ratio as much as the council does, but I also don't want our city to be sued into oblivion if this new plan isn't as economically feasible as we want it to be. I've read the HEG report, and it doesn't really go into detail about where it gets many of its cost estimates, nor does it really assess how the removal of office impacts the non-residential areas of the project. As such, this memo doesn't constitute substantial evidence, and it isn't sufficient to justify passing these amendments today. I remember that many of you criticized the last council for an apparent lack of proper process in creating the Vallco specific plan. But with the way these amendments have been drawn up and brought to the table with so little community outreach, a lot of those same criticisms you had about your predecessor's work apply here too. So Cupertino for All asks you to vote no on this item. I also think it'd be wise to sit down and ask yourselves, honestly, how this process you're running here could be more transparent and more public. I think you'd find that there's still a lot more work to do before we can confidently say that we're moving forward together. Thank you.
Okay, Celia House, followed by Chin Pan, followed by Yuva Arthur. Welcome, Celia.
Hi, Mayor and council members. I'm Celia House. I've been a Cupertino resident for 9 years, and a lot of that time was embroiled in the Vallco dispute. And I am here to represent myself in support of completing the Vallco project as expeditiously and effectively as possible. Today's discussion, whether you term it as downzoning, upzoning, or just planning, but without agreement from the developer, just tells me that it will take time, delays, and potentially legal troubles. And as you know, changing plans take time. And without discussing it with the stakeholders, it is unfair. And so that said, I think that reopening discussion through this amendment would just invite further division and frustration amongst residents who want to see a vibrant Cupertino community and not empty, wasted space. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Chin Pan, followed by Yuva Arthur, followed by Tessa Parrish. Welcome. Welcome, Chin.
Hello. Dear Mayor and City Councils, my name is Chin Pan, and I'm a Cupertino residency for the last 20 years. I'm speaking, representing myself. I'm in for this general plan amendment. I'm personally very disappointed with what so-called public hearing result last year. And the residency speaks with their votes last year by voting down city councils who ignored residents' voice last year. I happened to drive past New Apple Park last Monday night at 8 p.m. and I have to wait the traffic light to turn green twice before I can pass the Apple main gate. It's already past 8 p.m. I know traffic will be bad, but it's past 8 p.m. and Apple already have a lot of free shuttle, yet still a lot of cars came out of Apple after 8 p.m. With a shortage of the regional housing and worse traffic, we cannot have more office in the area to make the housing even worse. Please cap the housing to the original allocation so the crowded school in the area not getting worse. The school in the Vallco area already crowded as it is, and those kids who is going to move into the Vallco housing deserve the good educations as any other kids in any city areas. City, if the housing shortage, acknowledge that should building more housing in the area, see the enrollment declines. Oak can make money with their proposed plan of 200 units on the acres. I don't see why Sand Hill cannot. Yeah, we like to have more shoppings. My kids love to hang out with the shoppings. Please keep as much as possible the regional shopping to comply with general plan, so the kids have a place to hang out. And I want to show this map video here. Yeah, so it would be great if we can keep the regional shopping in this site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yuva Arthur, followed by Tessa Parrish, followed by Naidu Balaneni. Welcome, Yuva.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Yuva Arthur. I'm a Cupertino resident. I strongly urge you to say yes to the ordinances proposed. I would like to see Vallco developed into a wonderful community space, including retail, affordable homes, and recreation spaces for a community as a whole. I would like to see conscious effort to support young families to stay longer and make Cupertino a wonderful community. And in my humble opinion, this would not happen if more office spaces are built indiscriminately. A judicious mix of retail and for-sale homes at the location would give fresh impetus for this community to become a destination city in the Bay Area. I would like to see a rational step forward to make Vallco a better space instead of making it another office space that can only aggravate transportation problems due to poor public transit system and an already overcrowded I-280. I support height limitations in the proposed ordinances of GPA and elimination of office spaces at Vallco. I would further encourage more for-sale homes that will create more long-term commitment to the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being brief. Tessa Parrish, followed by Naidu Balaneni, followed by Venkat Ramganathan. Welcome, Tessa.
Hi, good evening again. So I'll try to make it brief as well. I know this isn't an easy topic. It is huge in consequences in every way possible. And as a realtor, I came into the business when interest rates were 15%. I went through the dot-com era and another recession. One of my first mentors, when I first came in, we were going through a recession, and he said, Tessa, every few years, you'll get the big wigs, financial analysts, or the investors, whoever, to somehow make sure that the market crashes. They come in, sweep up properties, up those goes values, they get richer, etc. Back then, I was very young, and I'm like, okay, whatever. Forward now, the last recession, we saw 1 out of 4 properties being picked up by investors, all cash. And that's when I started to pay notice. Now, I'm very well aware of the housing crisis. I have to tell my clients that they can't afford to live here. I've seen people who were here in San Jose in the 3 generations leave because they can't afford to live here, because their jobs were being taken away, etc. That's a different story. But I've seen people leave. I have to drive people 2 hours away to get them to a home. So I am well aware of this problem. This Vallco project, though, was only going to house 40 very low-income people. If I really thought that this project was going to help our housing, I would be all over it. Because as a realtor, I want that. I need that. I need to put people in there. But it's not. Only a small percentage was actually going to go to housing, and a much, much, much smaller going to very low-income people. So this, you're taking an office that's going to bring more takeaway from our local residents that are trying to move in, pushing them aside, gentrification, and I can't even tell you how many people have had to leave. But more and more I see properties vacant, Airbnb, just owned by real estate investors that are increasing the rental market and making it hard for our locals, yet the only people that can afford it are the engineers that are coming into the area. So there's a lot. What is causing the housing crisis is a very complex situation. But I think that adding more office without first finding out what's causing it is a bit irresponsible. You're entrusted to take care of us for generations to come. Please consider no office. And yes, I'm for housing, but limited. Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa. Naidu Balaneni, followed by Venkat Ramagathan, followed by Siva. I can't read this name. Okay, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and the staff present. I am a Cupertino resident for 17 years and consumer of the city services, and I represent myself here. While we want to see positive outcomes for that's sensible to both residents as well as the property owner at Vallco, its effectiveness is somewhat compromised and impaired by one of the planning commission members who has recused due to some litigation issues with the property. While we are going through this process, now I learned that another commissioner on the planning commission who seems to be somewhat influenced by the property owner and sitting on the commission and influencing commission work related to that property business. So I request the council to investigate that commissioner and perhaps remove if found to be true, or at a minimum let the individual be recused from the Vallco property business. And thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Venkat Ramganathan, followed by Siva, followed by Bill Kerr. Welcome, Venkat.
Hi. Good evening, City Council. I am Venkat Ranganathan. I am a 10-year resident of Cupertino and been in Sunnyvale and West San Jose for the rest of another 15 years. I live just few hundred meters from the perimeter road, so I can see all the vibrations and I can hear all the vibrations and feel the noise also from the Vallco. So I'm very much closer to this Vallco thing. I am bemused by the debate that we are having today on a couple of counts. One on the Vallco discussion that have been going on for the last few years, and also on a personal experience I had 10 years ago. So why are we debating this? The property owner submitted an SB 35 application, and they said that they are going ahead with building that plan with 50% BMR housing. None of the general plan amendments being discussed here tonight will have any effect on their ability to build their SB 35 project. Maybe that the reason is they are really not interested in building the SB 35 plan, and they are worried about the tier 2 plan rejection, and they want to go back to getting a getting this general plan with favorable conditions. And that brings to the experience I had 10 years ago when I applied for an application to add an addition to my house. They charged me $5,000 reinterpretation fee for checking, for basically considering the front of my house as the front of my house. Because we are a corner lot, the wider side of the house was the front of the house, and that was changed sometime later. So why are we giving more SOPs for a developer for economic considerations of them? The proper approach is to come back to the city council with a specific plan that everyone can live with. We are all not going to get everything we want. Everybody has to compromise, and we should have a plan that balances jobs, housing, not cause any further school overcrowding, provide the required amount of BMR housing or more, and include some real retail, not some chains that people may not really be frequenting that much, but real local retail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Siva, followed by Bill Kerr, followed by Hung Wei. Welcome, Siva.
Hi, my name is Siva. I'm a 15-year resident in Cupertino. I wanted to say that I would like you guys to say yes to your proposal right now. And what we need is housing. This adds more office space that requires more housing, so it's a snowball effect. I would like to reduce that one. So another thing that I wanted to bring up is that one of the recommendations in the staff recommendations, I live very close to the Vallco. We wanted the slope to be, if there is any building that is going to be built next to the wall, Vallco wall, we would like it to be 3-to-1 slope rather than 1-to-1 that they have. So that means if you are building a 60 feet, they only really leave 60 feet from the wall. We would like to have it as a little bit more distance from the wall to the building that's going to come up. Okay, thanks. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bill Kerr, followed by Hung Wei, followed by Joan Chin. Welcome, Bill.
Mayor and council people, my name is Bill Kerr, resident over 50 years here in Cupertino. I'm looking at this much differently than what you've heard from a lot of people. First of all, I oppose any approval that you might make of these plans. I would be against those. I've been a real estate appraiser for the last 40 plus years, and I had most of my work with public agencies. And I visited and did appraisals and valuations in probably 40 to 50 cities. When I would have to go into a new city, the first thing I'd do is look at the general plan. I'd have to look at the zoning. I could tell immediately if a city had a good general plan and whether they had a process if they were going to make amendments to that. I think the process here, the 2-month quick look at making some amendments to the general plan, which is really your plan for your whole city. If a property owner came in to try to amend your general plan and rush it through in 2 months, you would laugh at them. They wouldn't even get to first base. And here you are trying to rush some amendments that I don't think have had the right consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Hung Wei, followed by Joan Chin, followed by Rahul Vasant. Welcome, Hung Wei.
Mayor Sheriff, council members, I wasn't going to speak because I know you're going to have a lot of speakers, but listening to every other people speak, I would like to speak on 3 points. First point is, what's the hurry? Some of you campaign on listening to the residents. Why don't you take some time and get some more inputs? And also, SB 35 is going to be in court. What is the hurry to make decision tonight, where you can really wait until what's happening with SB 35? So take your time. And I just heard another bill who is a long-term resident. You're being accused of not being transparent, where you campaign on being transparent. You're accused of being hurrying through things, while you accuse previous council members of being hurrying through things. So don't do things that you think other council members made mistakes. Second, I heard young people say they can't afford to live here. I heard people say seniors cannot afford to move there out of 5-bedroom, 4-bedroom home to stay in Cupertino. Keep seniors in Cupertino. Seniors eat and drink, make donations, support nonprofit, they don't bring kids, so keep your seniors in Cupertino is a good thing. And educators, they can't afford to live in Cupertino. Keep them here is a good thing. People who work in Cupertino, let them eat, drink, and enjoy Cupertino, that's a good thing. People who are gonna work in the retail that you're gonna support in Vallco, don't they need place to stay? So what's the hurry? Do some more research, some economic development research. Find out what housing are needed. Take your time to do a general plan amendment. The second point I want to make is we entrust you with responsibility of a fiscal healthy Cupertino. If you're going to bankrupt Cupertino from lawsuits, look at what we cannot do. We cannot have law enforcement. We cannot afford to pave our roads. We entrust you to make economic decisions for Cupertino. So take your time to do that decisions. And third, I like to say is Cupertino does not stand alone. We are in part of Sunnyvale, Cupertino, Mountain View, San Jose. Work with other cities, develop housing or transportation along with other cities. Do not fight the state, but be ahead of the state. Make our own decisions, make our own plans, be ahead of state legislators. So take your time to do your planning. That's what you're elected to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Joan Chin, followed by Rahul Vasanth. And I have one card with no name, so if you submitted a card and I didn't call your name, it might be yours. Welcome, Joan.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to just make one comment right at the beginning. The zoning map that's currently posted on the city website is incorrect. It's still the one that had been approved with the 2018 Vallco specific plan. So you might want to get that updated. Regarding Vallco, I'd like you to remove the office allocation. Otherwise, we're going to create more demand from the state for housing that Cupertino can more than we can reasonably provide, given that we have a lack of affordable land and a lack of available land. The 2 million square feet of office allocation that was given to this as an allocation to this property owner on December 2014 was provisional. And so we're past the date, May 31st, 2018. And it looks like we need to eliminate that office and get back to scratch. The housing crisis is much worse today than it was back in 2014, but the real threat is from the state in the form of the state-mandated housing requirements due to excessive office building. So normal population growth is, I think, what we should be striving to house, not a lot more workers than we really have land to house. Cupertino could keep the previous allocation for housing of 389 units at Vallco and give the city some needed negotiation power with this property owner. And of course, there will be negotiation. In order to work toward the Vallco specific plan with sufficient community features, don't add more than 389 units at this time. Regarding housing, please consider a slope next to the neighborhood of 1.2 or 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 rather than 1 to 1. That's just too steep right next to the neighborhood. And please allow a setback more than 60 feet. I think we want the neighborhood to be eased into anything at Vallco at this point like it is now. Please don't put the CG zoning for retail anywhere in Vallco. We really would like to keep the retail regional shopping type of shopping available. We're no strip mall type setup. And please try to allow all housing to fit within the 13.1 acres. The election in 2018 was decisive, and this current council needs to carry out the mandate given to them by residents. So thank you very much for doing that.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Finally, I have Rahul Vasanth, followed by the card with no name. Welcome, Rahul.
Greetings, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I am here to encourage you to please vote yes on the entirety of this resolution. This conversation has always been about office and not housing. All of us are for housing. Personally, I would love to see a lot more disability housing for all disabilities and senior housing and housing that's catered to our most vulnerable populations, specifically under the umbrella of below market rate housing. The very low income and extremely low income housing is desperately needed. And I also just want to point out, based on a few observations from what I've heard in previous comments, this doesn't affect the SB 35 plan, and that SB 35 plan, specifically the BMR units, the developer is actually forced to build them. And if we look at the square footage of these units, it's just about 400 square feet. It's very difficult to have a family of 4, a family of 5. It sends a pretty poor message that the bare minimum has been provided, but considering the development at Main Street, I think it's actually quite nice that there's some sort of power behind this forced development for below market rate housing. Let's actually go to Main Street, because I really think that we've obviously got a rapidly aging population. I've worked with senior isolation. I have I really care about this, and I'm quite upset to see that after we were promised many senior housing units right across the street on Main Street, the developer backed out of building this, obviously with support of previous council, and not getting into that. But there were so many excuses. They didn't know how to build these units. There was a rise of construction costs. I don't think that's acceptable. And I've heard about the need for senior housing from previous commenters. And I really do have to say I got a lot of respect for developers, especially big developers. I know how much the market fluctuation can really affect the bottom line. Projects can be affected drastically. But by removing this office space allocation, I think that if some changes occur due to the lawsuit, the developer is going to have to come back and negotiate in good faith, just as the residents and our council have been saying repeatedly. We are here to talk with you. We'd love to share our thoughts, to share our input. We don't want office space. Let's talk about housing. And in order to advance this conversation, I would recommend that you vote on these resolutions. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you, Rahul. So I do have this one card here. Is someone out there that submitted a card that wants to speak, but there's no name on it? Okay, they may have left, or they may have filled out a second one. Okay, so that's 29 cards. I think we probably did get some good community engagement here. So now we will bring it back to the council. So I don't know who wants to go. Who wants to go first, John? Or do you want to wait?
Can we take 5 minutes before?
Oh yeah, that's true. It's 10:40, so yeah, we should take 5 because we'll probably go on for 4 or 5 more hours after this. Okay.
No,
So
no, we won't.
let's reconvene at 10:45. And Willie, can you come back? Okay, so now the council will discuss this. I can go first. I guess we lost a lot of our audience here. So I'd like to start, we got a lot of emails about this, and even some speakers, even though the city attorney, I thought, explained it, is we are not talking about the SB 35 project here. The SB 35 project is going forward. I know there's a lawsuit. It's got nothing to do with the council. We are not allowed to interfere. We have not taken a position, and this is something the judge will decide based on the merits of the case. And then I received a number of emails, which some said, can you downzone Vallco? Some said, can you upzone Vallco? Some said, can you keep the current zoning at Vallco? And as was explained, what the amendment, one of the amendments here today is talking about is rezoning 13.1 acres for housing. It's 389 units. It's actually more. You have to divide by 0.85, which I believe, is it 490 that it brings you to, or 459? Or 460, which?
Yes,
So-
459.
Right, 459. And there was a reason that we're doing this, or proposing it. It's because, as you all know, there was that letter from HCD, and it basically said, if this SB 35 doesn't go forward, you could be out of compliance with your housing element because you didn't rezone land at Vallco for those units that are in your RENA allocation. So we do need to take care of that here. That's if we keep scenario A. Scenario A includes housing at Vallco. Scenario B did not include any housing at Vallco. It selected one or two other sites and changed the numbers at the Hamptons and the Oaks. I think Marina was kept the same. And I think, as several speakers mentioned, there was a provisional office allocation at Vallco passed in 2014, but there was actually never zoning for office on the Vallco site. That would have required a specific plan, and obviously residents wanted a specific plan that complied with the general plan, and because of the referendums, there is now no specific plan, only SB 35. And finally, I'm happy that everyone spoke about the need for more housing, both affordable and market rate, because the regional imbalance between jobs and housing is something that we need to solve, and it is regional, not just Cupertino, even though, as has been pointed out, Cupertino's jobs housing balance is actually very good compared to some of our neighboring cities like San Francisco, Palo Alto, and Santa Clara. And it's key that we are responsible and we don't worsen our jobs housing balance by building massive amounts of office space that will generate tens of thousands of jobs. And then when the next RENA cycle from 2024 to 2032 comes around, the state will look at each city and say, oh my gosh, you've added all these jobs. Now we're giving you this huge new RENA requirement. And in a city like ours, we don't have a lot of empty land. That would put us in serious trouble. Where would we find the land to build housing to offset all those new jobs? And as the number of jobs goes up, and they're tech jobs and highly paid tech jobs, what we see is more displacement of the teachers, the low-income service workers. It's all exacerbated. The shortage is exacerbated, the rents go up, and the highly paid tech workers get the scarce remaining housing. So if we keep worsening the jobs housing balance, people mentioned children coming back. There won't be any place for the children to come back. There'll be no place for the seniors to move to if they want to downsize their homes and move to something smaller. So some people mentioned, oh my gosh, only 389 units. Well, technically, it would be 620 with the 35% density bonus and the 85% requirement from HCD. So that's 620 units. But that site could take more. And we need to engage with the property owner, if they're willing to come to an agreement of what would be an appropriate plan for the rest of that site, should the SB 35 not go forward for any reason, either the lawsuit or they make a decision not to move forward with it. So we do need a community engagement process that would determine, and maybe some offices would be okay there as long as there's a commensurate amount of housing to go along with it. One other thing I wanted to mention, in the Silicon Valley Business Journal a couple of days ago, there was a statement from the mayor of a neighboring city, I'll say, and it claimed that Cupertino never added a single unit of housing over the 5 years that the Apple Campus 2 was under construction. Well, that is not an accurate statement. Forget about our RENA allocation. Before that, we built quite a bit of housing that was completed and occupied during the Apple construction, including the Rose Bowl, Main Street. I believe the Biltmore expansion was completed at that time. There were live-work units on Foothill Boulevard, and there were also single-family homes and ADUs. I don't have that exact number. So to say that no housing was added during Apple Park construction is just completely wrong, and I just wish that publications would do some fact-checking before publishing erroneous information like that. And as another speaker mentioned, the Apple campus, which has approximately 13,000 people in the, quote, spaceship, and another 1,200 in other buildings, that was not built on an apricot orchard, although there might have been one before HP. It was built on an HP site, which at its peak had 9,800 employees at HP, plus I believe there were a couple of other companies that had buildings on that office park as well. So this idea that Cupertino added all those jobs at Apple and they were all new jobs is incorrect. First of all, most of those jobs were transfers from other Apple facilities, and they replaced a large number of jobs that existed there in the past. So I would like, personally what I would like is that the city work with the property owner, and we would craft a plan that was supported by Cupertino residents that would pencil out for the property owner, that would not further overcrowd the local schools around Vallco. And as we know, even though some schools in the district are under-enrolled, there's quite a few schools that are at capacity, and students are being sent to non-neighborhood schools as a result. So we need to be very careful when we look at the school numbers. So I'd like the city manager, she has the authority to bring the property owner, the residents, the city council all together, and hopefully we could find a solution that would be acceptable to all of us. And one of the residents that spoke today said, you know, we're going to have to compromise. We're not all going to get exactly what we want. We're not going to get the mall back with Sears and Penney's and Macy's. We just have to see what we can get would be acceptable for the residents. So I will be voting to adopt all of these resolutions and ordinances. That's all I have. Thank you. John?
Although so many of the residents that spoke have already left, I'd like to say thank you to everybody that has come and shared your input. To me, it's the most important thing is to get the community input, and what it does is it makes the job that much harder. But that is the job. So to all the residents and the ones that aren't here, you know, thank you for coming and speaking. The next important point to that is a lot of those residents, or a lot of those speakers are Cupertino residents, and quite a few are not Cupertino residents. And so I think it's really important that everyone understand that we have to, first and foremost, represent the Cupertino residents. It's nice to hear other people come and raise concerns and kind of ask us to help, but I think we all have to realize, first and foremost, we have to represent the Cupertino residents and do what's right for the Cupertino community. I am a strong believer that the residents have the right to determine the future of their community, and the elected officials have a duty to represent those residents. So I do care about what all the speakers said, and I hope that whenever we vote on something up here, that they truly appreciate that, first and foremost, our vote has to be what the majority wants in the Cupertino community. To get into a little bit of the technical, why do a general plan amendment? I believe that we have a duty to make sure all the rules and the checks and the balances are firmly in place for the community. Unfortunately, it appears that these days, the general plan that has been there and caused this community to be what it is today are not sufficient for some of the ways that it's being twisted and turned. I'm not quite sure if that makes sense to you, but developers are trying to, they're not following the intent, finding any place where they can do something that helps them, but not the community. And unfortunately, there are some of those things that we are concerned about, and so we do need to address those. There's conjecture about what heights are allowed and what developers are saying they say is allowed versus the general plan. 22-story buildings, is that the intent? Does any resident of Cupertino think that we intended the general plan to allow 14 or 22-story buildings without it coming to the city council? We need to fix those things. The housing allocation in 2014, meeting the RENA requirements, 30% more than what was required, meant $389 was given to Vallco. Conceivably, it could have been more. 24 or 2,600? Was that the intent of the general plan? The general plan says that you can have density of 35 units per acre. If anybody goes and looks at Monticello, at Lawrence and Monroe, it's 16 acres, and it's 825 apartments. If you sized it up to get 50 acres, you'd get 3x. 3 times 800 is 2,400. You know how much office is there? 0. Putting 2 million square feet of office on top of
2,400 apartments, was that the intent of the general plan? Well, that's only one example. Nuevo is currently being built as we speak, and I drive it every day on the way to my job. 27 acres, 950 units, 500 are apartments, and 450 are for-sale units. You know how much office is there? 0. What would have been the intent of the general plan when it said 35 units per acre, and when you size it up for the density bonus, okay, so you get up to 2,400 or 2,600 units, and then you say, well, gee whiz, we want some retail. We want to maintain for the residents that they have places to buy the clothes for their kids, for their family, the things for their house. So some of those acres need to be retail. Well, it could be mixed use, but then let's adjust the density there. If some of it is going to be office, once again, how many acres and adjust the density, and then you've got your mixed use. Something on the order of Santana Row. That's the intent. Unfortunately, what is being done with the general plan as it is written right now, complete maximum housing, complete maximum office space, and sacrifice the retail. Developer wins, community loses. That's why we need to rush to make sure that we have not been derelict in our duty to protect this community. Now, the developer at any time can come and ask for a general plan amendment and say, I want more office. And we then have the ability to say, we're going to negotiate. You want more of the office? Then there has to be some sacrifice on the housing. Is the community going to support that? If they will, then we have a duty to approve it. But we have the ability to do that negotiation when we have these rules in the general plan that apparently today are not tight enough to prevent what has been happening. Then we come back to, well, how do we decide on this tonight? I mean, we've got so many different things, so many different inputs from residents. How much housing? Is there any office? How much retail? We can't decide those things tonight, but we can go ahead and put in the fundamental rules that will then allow us to take your input and negotiate with the resident to make it a win-win situation. There is a very profitable potential for that site, and it's evidenced by Monticello, Nuevo, and all the other developments that are being done. And so I think we do need to make some decisions. The 389 with the sizing up for the density bonus, the increase for the other factor that Mayor Scharf talked about, which takes it to 600, that doesn't limit it. That gives us the negotiation power for everything above it. When you give the by right, which it does not have today, for them to get, if they were to bring in a proposal tomorrow and say, we want to build 400 or 500 units, it's more than the 389 that's allocated, and it has to come to us for our approval. And we're talking about increasing that to make sure that HCD has been met and that it's by right, so that there's no question that it's buildable tomorrow if he wanted it, but now he can come back to us and say, this is my mixed-use project for this site. And we negotiate on your behalf. We take that to the residents of Cupertino and say, do you support this? And as the one resident said, nobody's going to get everything they want. But we will be able to negotiate and make it as favorable to the residents as we can, and it'll still have significant profit potential for the developer. So I still struggle with what's the right decision for tonight. I'll make a couple comments for my fellow councilmen here. I do agree that next to the houses on the west side of Vallco that are going to be very close to the taller buildings, whatever the composition of those buildings are, I think we do need to make sure that we have that slope. Right now, those 22-story buildings are only a stone's throw from all those houses. 22 stories will be looking down in their backyards. So we need a building plane and we need heights so that our community is protected. So we're talking about what I saw in the staff report, 60 feet or 75 feet with retail, but that, unfortunately, is not where it stops because with the BMR, it increases. So the first one that I would suggest is that we cap it at the 60 feet, not 75. We've got the retail requirement component, and we stick with it. The general plan says 600,000 square feet. If a developer decides to put it underneath the residential, so be it. Because then when he goes and says he wants his BMR units, which we can't prevent, he's allowed, he gets the increased height above the 60 feet. So number one is I would cap it at the 60 feet. Number two, the building plane, staff's report said 1 to 1.5, 1 to 1.5. That means 1 foot in, 1.5 feet up. I think a resident clearly stated 1 foot in, or 3 feet in and 1 foot up. The other one was 1.5 in and 1 foot up. He's suggesting 3 in and 1 up. And I would be in favor of that because we are talking about a height, a total height of 60 feet, which will increase if that's going to be residential with the density bonus. So those two items, I think, we need to be very careful with. I do think that we need to make it by right housing so that there is no question that we have met the RENA requirements. I want to stress to the community, I really want to see BMR units for low, very low. I want to see units for individuals with disabilities. I want to see units for seniors. We'll do everything we can to help with that process. From what I heard about Main Street, the senior housing got converted to market rate because the developer said he didn't know how to do senior housing. If I got to do the research to find out how to do senior housing, I'll do it. I won't accept that type of a cop-out. So when we say you can have more units, we want to negotiate for the BMR, the senior housing, the housing for people with disabilities, but we don't want to be taken advantage of where if we make that a by right now, we can't we have no negotiation power to ensure that those things are going to stay with what the community supports. And in the end, whatever I need to vote on for a particular project that the developer would bring, it's going to have to meet the muster of the residents. The majority of the residents have got to be saying they support that project, and then it gets my vote. So my door is open. I've not turned any residents away that wanted to speak with me, and I would not turn the developer away if he wants to come and speak to me. My door is open. Let's talk. Let's redevelop Vallco ASAP. No games, no manipulation. So let's move forward. Mayor, back to you.
I just wanted to say one thing. At Main Street, the senior housing was not BMR senior housing, it was market rate senior housing. So.
No, but it was converted from senior housing to
Right,
market
it was,
rate.
no, it was converted from senior market rate to all ages market rate.
Right.
Right. And then one thing I neglected to mention, when the choices of the 13.1 acres of where to put it, I would think it's most appropriate next to the other housing at Rose Bowl and the lofts, because that's not right up against the housing on the west side. And that's, okay, thank you. Who wants to go next, Darcy or Rod?
Yeah, I'll go. So a couple of questions first. One for Eric, our outside counsel, advising on matters related to housing element particularly. I remember, and I forget what context this was, it might have been at the recent Planning Commission meeting, you had cited a density of 20 dwelling units per acre as being the threshold at which, if a jurisdiction or property meets that density, it is assumed to be compliant with the very low and low income BMR requirements. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. So when you have a site that's zoned for at least 20 dwelling units an acre, that's presumed appropriate to develop housing that's available for lower income. When the project comes forward for entitlements and is approved, at that point you look at the actual affordability. But when you're doing the zoning exercise to accommodate your arena, as long as it's zoned for at least 20 units an acre, it will be presumed available for development appropriate to lower income households.
Right, and that's codified in state law, correct?
That's correct. That comes directly from the housing element statute.
Okay, and the majority of developments that are of higher density, they qualify under those RHNA requirements based upon that density, correct? Not based upon objective income thresholds in terms of the price of the units.
So yeah, again, there's a difference between the credit you get when you're planning for it and when it's actually developed. So the majority of high density housing, when you're planning for it, is able to, you designate for at least 20 units an acre, and then you can take your credit for that for having planned for the RHNA. When the units actually develop, you have to report the actual affordability of those units, and the market demands are such that most new housing, regardless of density, is developed at above moderate income pricing.
And do you happen to know how many jurisdictions across the state actually met these affordability requirements as delivered?
Yeah, so only 13 jurisdictions have kept pace with issuing enough building permits by income level throughout the whole state.
Throughout the entire state?
That's correct.
Right. And so we're not we're not unique in terms of the amount of affordable housing units delivered. However, we have entitled a sufficient number of units based upon these density requirements to meet our RENA numbers currently. Is that not correct?
Yes, with the current entitled projects, including the SB 35 application, you've entitled enough units to meet your RENA allocation by income level.
Right, great. Okay, my other question was regarding the general commercial zoning versus regional shopping zoning of this area. And my concern is what qualitative effect that would have upon the shopping centers or the shopping center located at this site if we were to redesignate it to general commercial as opposed to what it is right now, regional shopping. Councilmember Willie alluded to this in that he was describing Santana Row, and I kind of wonder the same thing in terms of whether it would behoove us just to keep it at regional shopping in order to help ensure that you have more of that kind of a feel as opposed to the sort of the strip mall feel in terms of what we decide to designate for any particular area or areas of this site that happens to have a commercial aspect, a retail aspect to it.
So currently this site is designated for office, residential, and commercial. The proposed resolutions with the general plan amendments would introduce new designations, a regional shopping designation and a regional shopping residential mixed use designation. The general commercial zoning would be a way to implement the regional shopping designation that's being created, but then because of the policies around creating a specific plan to develop the regional shopping only portions of the site, the city would have another opportunity to develop more specific development standards for the type and character of development, and even take another look at the mix of uses if it wanted to.
Right, so that's certainly something we could do in the future with the ability to reach out to the community, talk about the preferences and their various experiences vis-a-vis retail and what they'd like to see in the context of the space, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, so I have a number of remarks. They range, and so bear with me, but I will get to each aspect of what we're discussing today. I really appreciate everyone coming out to share their input, and a good amount of my remarks have been edited along the way with regard to what's been shared with us, not just this evening, but through emails. And we've received a lot of emails in the last 24 hours. They're generally divided between yay and nay, as one might imagine for any given agenda item. And I would say that they were pretty evenly divided. I can't really speak to what the ratios were with regard to whether people were residents or not residents, but they were pretty evenly divided between the yays and the nays. This is just based on one person's intuition, but I think if we were to take it to a community-wide sentiment, right, with regard to a vote, I think the yays would tend to outweigh the nays in terms of this particular item. That's just my sense of things. But one sentence in the emails that we've received in the last 24 hours, to me, it gets to the heart of the problem. And that quote was, "This project will innovate transit around the area out of necessity," end quote, not out of law, end quote. However, if we build what is currently entitled under the SB 35 project, then we will of necessity need to fix transit, because it really will just get that bad. But who is talking about fixing transit? Let us consider a thought experiment. If the Vallco site were not owned by a very motivated developer, willing to pull in significant amounts of capital into the political lobbying process in all its various ramifications, including but not limited to tailor changing a state law as part of a budget amendment rider, would Cupertino even be on anyone's radar with regard to the affordable housing issue? We are the first jurisdiction in Santa Clara County to use Measure A funding to not just entitle, not just spend millions of additional dollars of our own money to support, but to deliver a purely affordable housing project. In the past decade, several significant housing developments asking for an entitlement and even a general plan amendment have been entitled. These projects do not make the housing crisis worse. And so let's be accurate about why we're here. We're here not because of reasons grounded in sound policy. Sound policy would take on squarely the very real problem with the jobs to housing imbalance pointed out by our city's policymakers over the last several years, rather than engage in this prolonged and expensive exercise in obfuscation and finger-pointing. Instead, because of demands for returns on real estate investment dollars, we are forced to contend with a conversation that simply fails to acknowledge what the real motivations are about. If one were really sincere about policymaking, then one would at least spend some of the millions of dollars spent smearing our residents and dragging our community through a, frankly, completely undeserved ordeal. One would at least spend some of that lobbying money on the question of how we are going to get the many thousands of more people that would be placing infrastructural pressures on our community around. But no, the tactic thus far has been to smear and spend, threaten and bully. I happen to believe that we are not just somewhat better than that. I happen to believe that we are much better than that. In an ideal world, we would be working to address our decades-long infrastructure problem such that the issue, the need of placing people in ever closer proximity to where they work does not become an existential one on a community-based level like this has. I think that we have a real opportunity here to reset the conversation. Yesterday, representatives of the property owner sent forth new economic analysis, asserting that the current proposal in front of us here tonight is economically infeasible. And yet, what happens to the economic feasibility, or I should say infeasibility, of the current entitled project under these new economic assertions brought forth by the property owner? I will only say that what seemed like an economically inviable project becomes even more inviable. My recommendations are these. First, if the current entitlement holds up against its current legal challenge, then we are going to have an overwhelming need for high quality, high speed, mass transit infrastructure. We sort of have an opportunity right now, a limited one, to think about how to deliver that infrastructure ahead of time. That is the crux of our problem. Yes, transit. I had much stronger language here, but in the interest of keeping everything copacetic and productive, I ask that our elected representatives and officials at the state and federal levels focus their efforts, instead of on attacking us at the behest of and behind developer dollars, on transit infrastructure and effective mass transit. The problem is here, and it's steadily getting worse. It will get exponentially worse if we wait until after the intractable traffic jams occur to fix the problem, at which time it will just be that much more expensive, if even at all possible, to fix the mess by getting mass transit right. Cupertino's residents are neither the NIMBYs that the results of a single property owner trying to optimize profits from a single project would have some believe, nor are they uncompassionate or impractical. If a reasonable project were before us, then we would support it. Now, some say that 389 units of housing is insufficient to cross the threshold of economic viability. I tend to agree with people who point out that ensuring economic viability for a wealthy property owner willing to use its money to attack a jurisdiction and its residents should not be the first priority of a government. If a resident were to overpay for a home, I'm certain that resident would not have much help in an effort to assert that the city is obligated to deliver general plan amendments and entitlements in an effort to help that resident achieve a profit margin. However, we do have housing needs, and we should be looking forward intelligently and responsibly toward the future. All of that being said, and taking in the totality of factors from what we're dealing with, and listening to community input, I arrive at my second recommendation. We need to identify clearly the priorities here now, and that includes accepting staff's recommendation for policy LU-19.3 that removes references to a future general plan amendment for additional housing. But this is for present clarity, not with respect to intentions for next steps. This also involves removal of what was always intended to be a provisional office allocation. But I moreover want to emphasize, again, that I think that what we are doing tonight is an initial general plan amendment, and additional planning is in order. Just a copy for Grace. Just pass these down. Thanks. I support the current proposal. I also support directing staff to come back to council at a future date with general plan amendments that would potentially deliver a very significant amount of housing without the adverse impacts upon the need for even more housing than is being delivered. Specifically, up to 1,500 units of housing at the entirety of the Vallco shopping district special area, with the following possibilities being examined for both economic and legal feasibility. And for clarification, let me make very clear that those 1,500 units would include the 389 amplified up to 600 some odd, potentially, that we're looking at examining, or we're examining tonight. Alternative one, under my proposals, is first a set of general plan amendments where the remaining property on the east side of Wolf Road, assuming that council approves the 389 dwelling units upon 13.1 acres on the east side of Wolf Road, which I believe is option D in staff's materials, is zoned for housing at 20 dwelling units per acre. So that's on the east side of Wolf Road, anything that's not those 13.1 acres. 20 dwelling units due to the threshold that Eric and I were talking about earlier. Second, under alternative one, the property on the west side of Wolf Road is zoned for single-family homes upon 20 acres at a density of 5 to 10 dwelling units per acre. The specific density to be recommended by staff following an analysis balancing out the economic and affordable housing considerations in light of the city's affordable housing requirements. Keep in mind that for owner-occupied units, we still have inclusionary zoning requirements. So 15% of those units would need to be below market rate. And then finally, under alternative one, the general plan at the site is adjusted to reduce the minimum amount of retail required to 400,000 square feet of retail to be located on the west side of Wolf Road in the non-housing designated land, or as ground floor retail on the east side of Wolf Road, or a combination of both. And primarily the reason that I dropped this from 600 to 400,000 is in recognition of the idea that 600,000 square feet of retail represents a lot of relatively lower paying jobs. And so if we're going to be delivering housing and we're leaning on the jobs to housing ratio and jobs housing fit, as other people point out, then we really should be cognizant of the idea that we don't want to deliver more, especially lower paying jobs than housing units. Alternative number two, a set of general plan amendments, and this is the alternative, I should say, that would deliver up to, but no more, absolutely no more than 1,500 units of housing, just from my perspective. A set of general plan amendments where the remainder of the east side of Wolf Road and 20 acres of the west side of Wolf Road is zoned for 20 dwelling units per acre, along with one, a calculation for what the total number of dwelling units would be if the density bonus is invoked, and two, options for granting additional units beyond the total with density bonus, based upon additional requirements for an even greater percentage of affordable housing units that follow the requirements set forth by Cupertino's BMR housing manual, such that the overall total of housing units does not and cannot exceed 1,500 units. And second, the general plan at the site is adjusted, again, to reduce the minimum amount of retail required to 400,000 square feet of retail, here to be located on the west side of Wolf Road in the non-housing designated land, or as ground floor retail on either side of Wolf Road in the areas designated for housing, or a combination of both. And so what I'm basically recommending here is that we explore two alternatives. One alternative does include single-family housing on the west side of Wolf Road. And so one couldn't be expected to put retail on the bottom of those types of structures. That's essentially the functional difference between alternatives 1 and 2 that I'm proposing here. I'm not sure, based upon economic analysis, whether the single-family housing idea would be economically feasible. Just kind of doing mental math, I know that single-family units that are new in Cupertino can go for quite a bit, but I ask that staff go back and evaluate that from an objective economic sense. I also ask that with regard to the retail component of the requests, that staff conduct its research and provide us with potentially feasible alternatives and justifications for why, possibly, fewer square feet of retail could still deliver for the residents of Cupertino a vibrant retail environment. And so I just want to say also that I'm completely sincere about the desire, and I think that it's reflective of the community, to deliver an environment that's good for everyone, that people want to go to. And so if the general idea is, look, let's not take shortcuts and designate something CG and end up with something that we think might just end up being, something that we look at later on and go, if a little bit more work had been put into this, we could have gotten a better environment. Let's just not have that. Let's take the time that we need in order to ensure that the rules that we set up point us in the direction that we're looking for here. Furthermore, if any of the heights, setbacks, or building planes we define here today require adjustments based upon the requested alternatives, then I ask that staff provide the alternative specific recommendations according to what would be needed to allow for such a plan. And with regard to Councilmember Willie's request for a 1 to 3 building plane off of the portal side of the property or the area, I think I would certainly support 1 to 1.5 at this point. I think I would need staff to examine what kind of impact 1 to 3 would have on the overall practicalities of the project. But I most definitively support the concept of making the building plane such that it becomes more optically palatable to the neighbors that are living directly to the west of this. Finally, the above suggestions do not apply to the triangular parcel on the west side of Wolf Road, known colloquially as the Simeon property, which I would support keeping or designating as retail, separate and apart from the suggested requirements described above, not the least of which, in terms of reasoning there, that property is not currently owned by the property owner of the property that we think of it as. And so I wouldn't include that triangular so-called Simeon property as part of the 400,000 square feet of retail either in these suggestions. And those are my comments.
So if I could just kind of respond, in order to proceed tonight, what if we negotiate on the building slope and make it 1 to 2? And still ask them to go and explore, the viability and stuff, but, the sensitivity of 60, which is going to grow with the BMR, at least the 1 to 2. I
think I could be convinced that essentially on 60 feet, that's 10 yards, right? That's another 0.5 off of 1.5 to get to 2. So I think also with the idea that we are in not a static situation here. I think everyone understands that, and we really just need to send that message that at the end of the day, we're leaning on our staff to give an evaluation and give good recommendations based upon our policy considerations and our aesthetic considerations and everything else that's being put on the table. And so, yes, I could support 1 to 2. Functionally, I would just, from the staff's recommendations, add perhaps one section on one of the resolutions regarding future intent and asking staff to go back and prepare something to the effect of general plan amendments in the future that would allow for up to 1,500 units of housing, as well as a minimum of 400,000 square feet of retail. So that would be functionally what my asks are, outside of or beyond the proposal, which I have said I support the current proposal this evening. But I would like to add that language to one of the resolutions.
So before we move to Rod, if it was option D, would you still want that, insist on that building plan? Because that's in an area that's already.
Right, so option D is on the east side of Wolf Road.
Correct.
And I believe that the building plan that we're discussing right now.
Is only on the west side.
Right, that's correct.
Okay,
It's
all
on the
right.
Portal Road side of the development.
All right.
But that building plane would would apply to all buildings at that location. Any buildings on that portal side.
Right, yeah, on the portal side, right, okay, that's fine.
You know,
That
whether it's
makes sense.
residential or not. And then the one thing that Councilman Paul didn't mention, and that is the total height. And again, I'm saying keep it at 60 for the time being, meaning it's still going to grow with the BMR requirement.
So as opposed to staff's recommendation?
75 with retail on the bottom floor.
Right.
But 75 is going to grow with the BMR.
With the density bonus, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the west side, if it was retail, it's not going to be that tall, probably.
But Rose Bowl is at 60 right now, so I
Yeah.
would want to keep it consistent, but then it's still going to grow with the BMR units. You move it up to 75 plus the BMR units, I mean, you're approaching 100 feet.
Yeah. Okay,
Well-
why don't we let Rod
All right.
go? Rod?
Are you sure?
I just got news from the state that Governor Newsom, he's canceling all these housing bills, and we're okay.
Oh, great, thank
Just
you.
so you know. Thought I'd add a little levity, thank you.
Well, we're done here then.
What's that?
Then we're done here.
Yeah, we're done, yeah. Okay, so, I actually agree with some things that have been said here, and I'm going to start with those things. We say we care about housing. We celebrated in the last week the 19 units at the veranda, and we all support BMR housing, so we say. And these, however, right, are projects that Stephen rattled off that were completed or entitled by past councils. So we have been slammed unfairly. The question is, for this council, are you serious about this? So the past councils worked through very deliberative processes. They were extended planning processes, and those councils understood that substantial BMR housing takes subsidies from market rate housing or from office. So, I really support Stephen in empowering our city manager to negotiate on our behalf. We should try and try again. I support, even as difficult as it may be with the decision that we may take this evening, I support going long on housing with market rate and BMR units at all income levels. I subscribe to studying the economic feasibility of plans that would add housing and reduce office by a city-hired expert such as EPS, who, in my judgment, did a good job last year for us. And I recognize that the estimates we have that were, carefully constructed over some months, are due for a refresh, so we have current data. We could assume feasible options, notwithstanding that refresh that I think it needs to be done. But could we, for example, start with the economic feasibility of the SB 35 project, submitted in good faith by a developer who apparently wants to make it happen? That's what we've heard on the face of it. And then, okay, ratchet down the office from the 1.8 million square feet to some degree, increase the housing from the 2,402 homes, and increase diversity in the BMR, because in that project is low and very low, but there is no moderate income housing for folks like teachers. There is no ELI for developmentally disabled adults. Or could we start with a specific plan, Tier 1 and Tier 2, and could we look at dialing down office from there and dialing up the housing? Now, as for bringing the office to zero, here's my concern. We know that in a mixed-use project, that part that most of our residents really want to retain, if there's any common thread in emails, it certainly is that we'd like to have retail, dining, entertainment be successful in the city. It's frankly, for a developer, risky. The recovery time is long. It's a negative contribution to a project most of the time, unless there's synergistic retail, such as we have down the street at Valley Fair. So the idea of mixed use, such as we see in very successful centers like Santana Row, is that the homes help nighttime and weekend sales for that retail, dining, and entertainment, while office helps the daytime sales. So I would really like to see us think about very carefully about having enough office to make that retail, entertainment, and dining scene healthy at this site. Frankly, and we're competing with others, right? We are competing with the very successful Santana Row. We're competing with their neighbor, which is the successful regional shopping mall in our capture area. So those are the things that I think we should do. Here's what I can't support. You know, moving forward with no dialogue with the property owner, it's fine. I recognize that a lot of residents would prefer to see this site have a few housing units or maybe no housing and still be a mall. We've had lots of studies done over time that tells us that that's not feasible, and it's not where we're at. What I'm not supportive of is, having no dialogue prior to taking this, no substantial dialogue with the property owner. We have also here, let's consider the process we used in 2018. We embarked on a 9-month process. We had numerous meetings. We had intensive on-site planning. We did involve a lot of residents. It was widely noticed throughout the city. We had good engagement. Now, some of you say, well, you know, we listened to the developer. We talked to the developer too. Yeah, we did. Because guess what? Nothing gets done whatsoever if the developer isn't satisfied. Nothing gets done whatsoever if the project is not economically feasible. And that's what some of the folks we've heard from basically miss. It's like you could tell a property owner that they have to do X and either it's that or nothing. Well, it's not true, right? There are other forces involved here. And, you know, those forces include the owner and the state's interest in moving things forward. And I think if we're being realistic, we have to recognize these things. We have to recognize the serious potential for litigation risk. So we could have the developer, we could continue this war where the developer is putting a lot of money into lawyers, and we're putting a lot of money into lawyers, and we could get very little done, or we could actually begin a good faith negotiation based on scenarios that are actually economically feasible. I don't believe this one is. I mean, it certainly begs the question, what are you going to do with all but the 13 acres? It's all going to be retail, really? And as for the process here, honestly, compared to 2018 where we had a robust 9-month process, to have a planning commission meeting on the 30th of July and another meeting here at City Council, and that's our dialogue with the public, no, this is not the right thing to do. And as for the site being piecemealed here, every good planning effort takes advantage of a whole site, right? Any planner worth their salt would advise us to plan an entire site rather than to do it piecemeal. So we have an opportunity to get a better result when we factor in all the uses, find compatibility between them, whether it has to do with parking or infrastructure or whatever. When we only consider a part of the project, we're missing the rest of the pieces of the puzzle. And we also have to consider fit to adjacent properties. When the Marina project came before this council, we heard that we could get a better project, say, if the Bank of America site could be included, because now we could have frontage on Stevens Creek Boulevard. Unfortunately, it wasn't. So we got a project, and now they're struggling to try to make that work. When the Biltmore expansion came before us, we talked about the value that could have been added if that falafel shop, the then falafel shop, could have been included, but we couldn't, right? Now here, instead of doing what a planner would say is good practice, to take a look at the whole site, we're doing just a piece of it. So I think this is a mistake. I think that we should be seriously engaged. I think if we are serious about wanting to negotiate anything other than the current SB 35 plan, right, this is putting one more impediment in the way of that relationship. So I would advise against it. I hear where you're coming from. I know we're going to do it. And I hope, despite all of this, at the end of the day, right, that at some point, we hired Deb in no small part because we knew that she could negotiate deals, and she's done that successfully at NASA to get housing and other things done. I'm hopeful that if we entrust her with carrying on a dialogue, we might get to a better place. And I will continue to hold out that hope for all my time on this council and beyond, right, until we actually have a new wonderful project at this site. But I'll point out to you that there are things there are forces here at work that are beyond our control. And I would love it if we started taking actions from this dais that put a headline out about Cupertino going long on housing at Vallco. That would be a wonderful thing to me. And I would love it if we could get into a mode where we were actually getting serious about an economically feasible project that might have 3,000, 4,000 housing units with, accommodating all income levels. Now that would be something that I think all of our residents might be really proud of, given the housing crisis we have in Silicon Valley. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of responses. So we're considering the 13.1 acres here tonight because we've been told that it's necessary to rezone sufficient land to meet our RENA number in case the SB 35 project doesn't go forward. I mean, we could have done this before, maybe we should have, but now HCD has sent that letter and said, hey, if this SB 35 is not completed, your housing element is not going to be compliant. So we really do need to do this 13.1 acres. And someone said, what's the rush? And there actually is a rush. We need to do this. The other 37 acres, they're not going to be left barren or converted back to apricots or whatever they were before. Darcy came forward with a bunch of two different proposals. The property owner can come back with a specific plan. Deb and the rest of us can negotiate with them. And I mean, I think that's the proper way to go. And no one says we're not going to go greater on housing than those, I guess it's 620 units, not really 389, if you apply the density bonus and divide by 0.85. But as to your suggestion to 4,000 housing units there, I guess I'd be a little cautious on that, given the state of the school enrollment in that area. Really, we should be looking at housing in the areas where the schools are under-enrolled, not where they're sending students to schools outside their neighborhood. So, 2,000 might be okay, but I don't know if 4,000 would be appropriate there. And also, there still could be some office there. It just needs to be commensurate with the amount of housing. This isn't closing the door to office. It's just that 2 million square feet provisional allocation should just not be there anymore.
No, I mean, I appreciate your sentiment, and I hear you. And I mean, I'm pledged to work with you to see if we can get something better done, right? All I'd observe is schools have to rezone kids from time to time. It's always a painful process when they do, but we know that CUSD is really hurting. They're funded at the floor of districts in the state. They're funded on a per student basis, and they have declining enrollment, and they really are in a financial crisis. On top of that, they're having a hard time getting teachers. I think we deserve to look at fixing those problems, right? I know that once Vallco comes up, the high school district will benefit significantly from new property tax. So, I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and I think, though, that for CUSD, if you ask them, would you like us to figure out how to increase our housing stock wherever we have opportunity, such as a big site like this, and we have no other at this time, then I think, they might say, oh yeah, please, we need a higher student generation rate.
Oh, can I bring forth a motion?
Sure.
Madam City Clerk, could you conduct the first reading of ordinances 19-2187 as well as 19-2188?
This is the first reading of ordinance number 19-2187, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino, eliminating references in the municipal code to the Vallco Town Center specific plan and adding a language establishing development standards for a new mixed-use plan development with multifamily R3 residential and general commercial zoning designation PR3CG. And this is the first reading of ordinance number 19-2188, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Cupertino amending the zoning map to rezone 13.1 acres within the Vallco Shopping District Special Area to mixed-use planned development with multifamily R3 residential zoning PR3CG and general commercial uses, and the remainder of the special area to general commercial CG.
This is going to be
Okay, for the second one, don't we need to specify which 13.1 acres?
Well, my motion
Okay.
will identify
sorry.
potential location
Okay.
D. So this will be pretty long. I'm trying to capture the suggestions that were made here. So I move that the City Council, 1, adopt a resolution number 19-108, a resolution adopting a second addendum to the Environmental Impact Report for the 2014 General Plan Amendment, Housing Element Update, and associated rezoning project. B, resolution number 19-109, which was in the materials GPA-2019-01, a resolution amending the general plan to remove office as a permitted use from the Vallco Shopping District Special Area and remove associated office allocations. C, resolution number 19-110, which was GPA-2019-02 in the materials, a resolution amending the general plan and general plan land use map to establish height limits and enact development standards for residential uses within the Vallco Shopping District Special Area, and identifying a recommended location for future residential development on 13.1 acres of the special area based on potential location D, identified by staff, with the following additions of a 1 to 2 building plane adjoining the western side of the shopping district shopping area, also known as the Portal neighborhood, and the addition of the following language to the resolution, quote, "Now therefore be it further resolved, the City Council directs staff to initiate a specific planning process for the portion of the site designated regional shopping, and to consider as part of that process a plan that would include a maximum of 1,500 units of housing for the entirety of the Vallco Shopping District Special Area, inclusive of any and all housing and density bonuses, including any added incentives for features such as housing for extremely low-income households and housing for persons with disabilities, including developmental disabilities, and reduce the amount of retail required to 400,000 square feet, exclusive of the parcel known colloquially as the Simeon property. 2, introduce and conduct the first reading, which the city clerk has done, of A, ordinance number 19-2187 in the materials. It was MCA-2019-01, which is, quote, which the city clerk has read, as well as ordinance number 19-2188 in the materials known as Z-2019-01, which the city clerk has read. And 3, direct the city manager to attempt to engage with the property owner to discuss potential alternatives. That's my motion.
Councilmember Paul, could we have an additional amendment to note that Resolution 19-110 includes the amendments shown on the desk items presented to council?
Okay, so my motion is edited to include in 1C that the resolution number 19-110 is amended to reflect the copy that has been placed on the dais tonight by staff.
And can we capture the 60-foot as opposed to the 75-foot?
I will go ahead and make that change. Also, with regard to motion item 1C, have a 60-foot height limitation throughout the entirety of the Vallco Shopping District Special Area.
Thank you.
So is it time to second? Or do you have something else, Madam City Attorney?
Yeah, I think I'll just clarify that by, based on Special Area D, that we are designating the 13.1 acres of the Vallco site as regional shopping in location D, as shown on attachment 10 of the staff report for this resolution.
Yes, that was the intent.
Thank you.
That's correct.
And I'm sorry, could you clarify, did the motion include incorporation of the desk item amendment to the ordinance as well? I know I heard you say the general plan. I didn't hear you also incorporate the ordinance amendments that were included as the desk item.
Can you encapsulate, for the public's benefit, what those amendments were to the ordinances?
There was a clarification in the way that the P zoning would be applied to clarify that the by right approval and the alternative procedures were only applicable to the P zone applied within the Vallco Shopping District Special Area, not other P zones in the city.
Okay. Yes, I will incorporate that into the proposed legislation. First.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I just have one question. So the height limit of 60 feet and then plus the density bonus, right? So it would be higher than 60 feet.
Potentially, if a project came forward that met the qualifications for density bonus, it could request a waiver for height.
And if another SB 35 project came, would that height limit still apply?
The height limit would apply, again, with the qualification that a density bonus
Right,
could potentially
okay.
modify
All right,
it.
thank you. I just wanted to be sure of that. Sure, so, yeah. So you already seconded?
Yes.
So we can vote. On our lights.
And the motion carries with Sinks voting no and Chow recusing.
Okay, so we voted on all of them together?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I think you can bring the vice mayor back if she's.
Oh, yeah, if the vice mayor's still here, she may come back. I don't know if she left. Let me go look in that.
Quick break, 2-minute break. Out here. All right.
Call her at home and tell her to come back.
No.
Let's not do that. Right, okay, so
At the end of our agenda.
we're at the end of the agenda. Are there any council and staff comments before we adjourn?
Oh, I have a couple.
Okay, welcome, Councilmember Paul.
Okay, so I attended the grand opening of the Veranda Affordable Housing Project on August 12th, which the council first allocated $3.672 million Cupertino dollars towards on July 5th, 2016. I've been very happy to support this project, including the initial financial allocation more than 3 years ago. On August 13th, a recognition ceremony for Fusako Hoira at the Council General of Japan's residence in San Francisco took place. Ms. Hoirup has spent decades teaching the art of flower arranging in Cupertino and has organized a truly amazing flower show here every 2 years. For her efforts, she was recently awarded in person the Order of the Rising Sun Gold and Silver Rays by the Emperor of Japan. Yeah, and on August 18th, the Library Foundation held an award ceremony for the winners of the S4 Super Summer Science Search Contest. The topic this year dealt with a scientific approach towards identifying optimized elements of an expanded library program room. I look forward to seeing their presentation, hopefully, perhaps in the month of October, and I think they'll be very succinct about it. It's a lot of different presentations, but the organizers told me that they can contain it within a couple of minutes of a edited presentation.
Is that it?
Oh yes, that's all.
John, go.
So, due to Mayor Scharf not being available for the Parks and Rec volunteer, I got the opportunity to, and the honor to be there and speak to the volunteers and to see them get their certificates. Really good to see so many young people volunteering their time for our community. We had the town hall, which the main topic was housing on August 10th. It got very good reviews of feedback from the residents that attended. I got to the veranda ribbon cutting grand opening late, so I missed the speeches, but I was very impressed with the development there, and I'd like to actually somehow get more of those projects on our horizon. If we can maybe identify 3 sites that would have the potential and then see how we can move forward with 1, 2, or all 3 of those. And then attended the Indian flag raising on the 15th. There again, I got there late and missed the speeches. Tough week.
You seem to miss a lot of speeches.
Yep.
Okay, so I already mentioned the Sacramento advocacy trip on the 13th, and then on the 15th I was at Independence Day, and then I went to the Disaster Council meeting, and I believe, and then that afternoon was the VTA PAC. I went on the city walk on the 17th. Let's see, also on the 10th. So both city walks, Blackberry Farm and then Memorial Park. And the Blackberry Farm walk, we got to go along the Linda Vista Trail, which former mayor is donating the land to the city. Very nice trail, collected 14 golf balls. I don't know how they were able to hit those golf balls all the way up from the golf course, which is located quite a ways down from the trail. But very nice trail. This will be great when it's open. A real good connection that's really needed. Let's see, what else did I do? Indian Independence Day as well for the flag raising. And then the City Walk at Memorial Park. These city walks, I really want to thank John and the city manager, because these are really good. You get so much information, and even at the end of the walk, someone cornered me and talked to me for an hour about traffic issues over at Mary Avenue, where it's being used by corporate buses as a carpool spot, and they're using up all the parking spaces, so there's no parking for the dog park left, and a lot of issues that you just wouldn't, a lot of people can't come to city council meetings and stay till after midnight, and you really do want to talk to them, because everybody wants to be heard, and people have a lot of good input if you can engage with them. So I really want to go on more of these walks and encourage other council members to go. I mean, there can only be 2 of us due to the Brown Act, but I'm willing to not go sometimes, and maybe someone else would join. Unfortunately, our city manager did not join us on the last city walk because she was at Comic-Con. And that's all I have. Rod?
I learned this week that our city manager has a history at Vallco. Would you care to share?
I worked there from the age of 15 to age 20 at Sears, Roebuck and Company in the women's lingerie department.
Well, no, never mind. Thank you. I don't have anything.
I wanted to make one note.
Okay.
That the veranda has won the very prestigious Structures Award from the Silicon Valley, the San Jose Business Journal Structures Award. A previous project of mine won that. It was the, what's called the sustainability base at NASA. But it's a very prestigious award, and the ceremony is September 19th. There'll be some press, but I wanted to thank staff for taking the initiative for writing it up, and guess what happened? We won. So it's really good.
Okay. Anything else? If not, wow, it's early. Adjourned.